across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
And good afternoon. Yes, welcome to the home of common sense. Thank you to Julia Hartley-Brewer. Back tomorrow morning, of course, at 10 o'clock. What do we got? OBR chief Richard Hughes has quit. What did I say? Alicia, what did I say on air yesterday? By 6 o'clock, someone's going to walk the plank from the OBR. And 4:30, we'd hardly been off air. Richard Hughes quits following last week's budget leak, though the Conservatives say he was pushed out for exposing Rachel Reeves's lies. More on that shortly. Also this afternoon, as you've heard, David Lammy calling for judge-only trials for offences under 3-year sentences to tackle the nearly 80,000 case backlog, saying courts cannot cling onto jury trials for the sake of tradition. He is so demonstrably wrong about all of this, but he's sticking with it. We'll bring you the details in just a moment. And West Streeting is accused striking resident doctors of attempting to wreck Christmas as they announce a 5-day walkout from the 17th to the 22nd of December. This should make you ill just thinking about these bozos striking when they're meant to be saving lives. People will die, by the way, spoiler alert. It's their third strike this year. They're looking for a 26%, just the 26% pay rise. Nice if you can get it. Everything you need to know, all the breaking news right here on Talk. 0344 499 1000. So there he is, David Lammy, the Justice Secretary, a man who was, nobody had really heard of half an hour ago. And there he is, changing the entire basis of our legal system. He says he stands for victims, not traditions, as he rips up centuries-old rights to trial by jury. The Justice Secretary has announced that jury trials essentially are going out of the window. And if you crunch the numbers on this, even in some of the most serious cases, because that's what this will come down to. Let's have a listen to what he said in the last half an hour.
Sir Brian estimates that they will deliver justice at least 20% faster than jury trials. And whilst jury deliberations remain confidential, judges provide reasoning for their verdicts in open court. So this will hardwire transparency into our new approach. I'd like to clear up some misconceptions that colleagues unfamiliar in this area might hold. In England and Wales, magistrates have long done the vast majority of criminal cases. That was true in the Victorian era, it's right through to Winston Churchill's time, and today magistrates hear about 90% of criminal cases. In fact, only 3% of trial cases in England and Wales will ever go before a jury.
He's very sure about this. I mean, there he is standing in the House of Commons, the mother of all Parliament, proclaiming that 900, nearly 1,000 years of legal tradition goes out of the window. It's not tradition like Christmas. This is tradition for very good reason. When you look around the world and you look at the various legal systems that are there, you could be in North Korea and someone just with the nod of the head will string you up by the kahunas, and that's the end of that. Here we have a different system, of course, widely been adopted around the world for centuries, and it mostly works. In fact, no one so far has found a better system, but David Lammy has found a better. He's so into this idea of reducing jury trials. You'd think this was, in fact, so sure is he, you'd imagine that this was the one thing he'd been carrying around with him since he was a rebellious left-wing teenager, thinking, if only I could get into power, if only I could get the big job, maybe eventually they'll put me in the Department of Justice, I can bring in my wisdom, my philosophy when it comes to the ridiculousness of how we use jury trials. But of course it isn't that, because only half an hour ago he had a very different view. Have a listen to David Lammy speaking in just 2020.
The jury system is fundamental to our constitutional arrangement. We should not use the coronavirus as a cover to abandon juries, which is the opportunity to be judged by 12 of your peers. Juries being replaced by judges and magistrates is effectively the establishment. rather than your peers who live in your community deciding what justice should be.
Wow. I mean, he was very sure then, clearly not so sure now, because he's completely changed his mind. And now we end up with a very different system where we've got juries that are able to, in fact, juries that will only be there for certain cases if the sentence is likely to be over 3 years. Now, of course, let me remind you that there's a whole string of offences that may result in 3 years or less, and they are very serious. In fact, all those offences are serious. It doesn't matter when he says, well, most of the cases are currently judged by magistrates' courts anyway. Well, yeah, that's fine, but the remainder are done by jury, and there's a very good reason for that. In fact, there's a trust in that, and that's what's central to all of this. How should the justice system be reformed? 0344 499 1000. Are you team jury or team judge on this one? How do you rule yourself on what is the most authentic and fair and intelligent system that we could have for a fair trial? 0344 499 1000. Crucially, volunteer community magistrates will deal with the majority of all criminal cases, will take on even more work. So you might find yourself taking the load off one area and adding it to another area. Let's get a word on this and the other big stories of the day. The journalist Robert Taylor is back with us. Good afternoon to you, Robert.
Hello, Ian.
Nice to have you with us. So let's start then with David Lammy. Where else will we begin? Of course, OBR, in fact, David Lammy, yes. Let's start with him. And of course, the judge-only trials for offences under 3 years. Let's have a listen to him speaking this morning.
There's a group of cases where you can get up to 5 years, generally speaking. They're called triable either way cases, and also where a defendant can opt to have a jury, and I'm looking at that. What I mean by that is if you steal an iPhone this afternoon from Curry's, should you be able to opt to have a jury? The trial may take 2 days, and inevitably that will cause further delay for more serious and egregious crimes like rape or murder. So that's the question that I've been looking at, and that's what I'll be announcing later on today. I want to be absolutely clear. Juries remain fundamental to our system. Over 300,000 people or so are serving in our juries every year. I'm grateful for all that work, and it remains the cornerstone of our justice system.
Well, there it is, Robert. It's the iPhone from Curry's example that he's offering up there as the reasoning for this. What are you making of it?
Well, what I make of it is that, like the Prime Minister, he is embarking on a massive flip-flop here. I rather agree with what he said in 2020, which was we couldn't use lockdown as an excuse to get rid of jury trials. I still think that's the case. Yes, the backlog has doubled pretty much since the ruinous lockdown that we all had to go through 5 years ago, 4 years ago. But that is no excuse to get rid of this ancient right. And it's interesting, he said, if you steal a mobile phone, do you want to, we'll stop the opt-in to a jury trial. What if you're innocent? What if you're actually...
Yeah, what if you didn't steal the mobile phone? The whole premise of our system is that you are innocent.
You're innocent until proven guilty. That's what we've all been brought up to believe. And that is the basis of jury trials. That when it comes to a trial, you want to be tried in front of 12 men and women who will look at the things from an objective, not, as David Lammy said, establishment point of view. You want to be an objective point of view. That's what you get with a jury trial.
He says it's the only way to avoid total collapse of the justice system, and you have to be bold and meaningful to do that. Now, I'm not absolutely sure this is going to save what he thinks it's going to save. So fair enough, you haven't got to cobble together a jury. You haven't got to have a prolonged case. It doesn't get kicked into the long grass to take place, X amount of months or even years down the line. However, that workload is then going to go to magistrates. So do you not eventually end up creating the same problem just in a different part of the system?
Yeah, well, I think his view is that magistrates' trials can be carried out more effectively, more efficiently, and by the way, not necessarily reaching justice. But if he's in the business of clearing the backlog, I can see what he's saying. But I go back to what he said in 2020, which is when, of course, the Tories were in power, he said the government need to pull their finger out and acquire empty public buildings across the country to make sure these, being jury trials, can happen in a way that is safe. So he was all in favour of more government expenditure when he was in opposition to sort out the backlog. Now he's in government, he's flip-flopped the other way.
Yeah, he certainly has flip-flopped. And it's sort of on a largely separate point, I suppose, Robert, but it does sort of expose, if you like, the weirdness of our system. I don't believe for one second David Lammy came up with this idea. Somebody in the Justice Department said, look, we've had this thing floating around for a while. You might want to give it a go. They'd all agreed. And then under those kind of curious rules of collective responsibility, he's had to go out and sell the policy.
That could well be true, but in that case, why doesn't he say to us, look, I've changed my mind on this. Now I've got into government. I recognise things that I didn't see when I was in opposition. I made a mistake when I said that in 2020. I now realise it was a mistake. I'm sorry. Now, if he said that, we'd respect him more. If Keir Starmer said that, Rachel Reeves said that, we'd respect them more. But they try and cover up their own inconsistency.
Yeah, completely.
Thereby just increasing the reputational damage to themselves and their government.
Yeah, I'd love to hear from people this afternoon as well, and we're taking calls on the general question of, you know, are you team jury or are you team judge on this in terms of how our system should work. Lines are open 0344 499 1000. But I'd be really interested to know if anyone has been through the system and, you know, it was only because of a jury that you were found not guilty because you didn't do it, but you had a fear that, you know, had that been tried by a solitary individual, as well-meaning as they will say they are, it wouldn't have had the same effect. So if you or somebody in your family have been through that system, our lines are open. David Lammy also forms the backbone of our next story as well, Robert. It's a great day for Lammy. This is, of course, confirmation from the Justice Secretary that 12 more accidental prisoner releases have happened in the last few weeks. Two of those releases still haven't been found. They previously reported 91 cases over there at the Ministry of Justice, accidental releases between April and October. But David Lammy has confirmed that since November the 11th, another 12 were mistakenly freed. Let's have a listen to what he said.
I made it clear in Parliament that on a paper-based system, there will always be human error, and there has been a human error for all of my lifetime. Until we move to a completely digital system, I think it's impossible to rule out error. But there has been a spike. It's on a downward trajectory. There have been 12 since I made that statement. At the moment, 2 are currently at large.
I mean, Robert, what is happening over there? I know that, you know, this has happened under previous governments as well, but this lot are currently the government. He's the Justice Secretary. He said he got the whole thing under control when the last lot legged it out of C Wing, when they should still be locked up. And now we get another 12, 2 still out there somewhere.
And I just don't buy this stuff about it being a paper-based system, and that's the problem. It was always paper-based until about 15, 20 years ago, and we didn't have this level of people being released by mistake. Yeah. This is incompetence that goes to the very, very top. And I have to say, I think previous Justice Secretaries and people in David Lammy's position might have looked at this and said, as the OBR chief has said, this is an appalling error. I'm the top guy. I have to take ultimate responsibility here. And I would say even resign my position. I would certainly consider that, but we're getting no such thing from David Lammy whatsoever. Just imagine, Ian, what he would have said if this had happened under a Conservative government.
You can absolutely hear him, can't you? He's a fairly loud, bellowing voice when it comes to political angst. And you can hear the man absolutely gunning for the Tories had this been the other way round. And here he is, not just contradicting himself on jury trials, but giving us some lousy excuse about prisoner releases based on too much A4.
It's astonishing. And I think for anyone listening to this programme right now, we're thinking, how can you release even one person in error who's meant to be in prison, let alone 12? And then we find 2 of them are still at large. They could be very dangerous people for all we know. I mean, it's an astonishing indictment of the system in this country and the way our public services are breaking down. If there's anything that needs more funding, it's stopping the release of prisoners before their time. It is quite astonishing.
100% it is. Stay with us, Robert. More stories still to come. 0344 499 1000. Over to you. Your thoughts on this announcement's just happened in the last 45 minutes. David Lammy, the Justice Secretary, announcing that jury trials for crimes that carry a likely sentence of 3 years or less will be thrown in the bin. There will be no jury for you if it's likely that a guilty verdict would have resulted in a sentence of 3 years or more, 3 years or less, so you won't get that opportunity. Even if you didn't do it. I know, people go, well, he's in court, he's a wrong un, shouldn't be there anyway. Well, that's just like eroding the whole premise of innocent until proven guilty. Your thoughts on that? Why are you pro a jury, or do you see, and I'm going to ask this in fairness of balance, do you see any kind of redeeming qualities in the statement that the Justice Secretary has given? Is there part of you that thinks, yeah, that makes sense? I can't see how it does, frankly, because justice should not be decided on how long the waiting list is. And yes, there is a backlog, but I'm sorry, you cannot... you wouldn't say to a patient in hospital, I'm sorry, there's a bit of a backlog going in, so unless you've got cancer or tuberculosis or something, I'm afraid we're taking you off the list altogether. And maybe get some treatment at the GP surgery. It's like, well, yeah, possibly, but I need my foot taken off, mate. I don't think Dr. Bailey is about to do that. 0344 499 1000. And if you've been through the justice system and you know full well what it feels like, the reassurance of justice, of having a jury there, as distinct from sitting in a room with just one bloke looking at you, one woman looking at you, saying, yep, I've looked at the case, I've decided you are guilty. And it might be not guilty, but the fabric, the depth of justice, is that suited in this scenario? And what was your experience of being on the receiving end, if you like, of a jury-based decision? 0344 499 1000. Big news coming this December. Our talkTV app is moving to the Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. From Monday, 1st of December, the talkTV app will no longer exist, so don't miss out. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, 22 minutes after 1 o'clock. Robert Taylor is with us, looking through the big stories of the day. And we're back to Rachel. It seems that Rachel Reeves and David Lammy have dominated the news agenda for about the last week. They've been the two big stories in town. And today, late afternoon yesterday, we called this on the show, by the way, Robert, around about 2 o'clock. I said to one of our guests, look, somebody from the OBR is going to walk the plank before 6 p.m. And around about 4:30 yesterday, the OBR chief, the top man, Richard Hughes, quit after that budget leak, though the Conservatives reckon he was pushed for exposing Rachel Reeves' lies. What is the truth here? He did, however, take full responsibility for the error in a letter to the Chancellor and the Treasury Committee after the OBR, of course, accidentally published its fiscal outlook ahead of Rachel Reeves' budget, namely down to the fact that the password to get into the OBR's website to see all the detail was simply the date of the budget. So you just changed it from last year. A load of journalists thought, oh, we'll try Budget 2024, we'll try what Budget 2025 does. And bingo, it opened up the whole thing almost an hour before she'd even stood up at the dispatch box. What are we making of this, Robert?
Well, we were talking before the break about the incompetence of the Department of Justice releasing prisoners. And this is almost as farcical, isn't it, Ian? Releasing the detail of the budget, in fact, the whole budget, not just the detail of it, 45 minutes before Rachel Reeves speaks. It's extraordinary, of course it is. And I think Richard Hughes did exactly the right honourable thing in taking the ultimate responsibility for this. I just wish some people within the government would take a leaf out of his book and think, what are we responsible for that's gone horribly wrong? Yeah. Deceiving the public, deceiving the markets, deceiving the media on the run-up to the budget. And perhaps we should also do the honourable thing and resign our positions. That is, after all, you might think, what they demanded of previous ministers in the last Conservative administration at the drop of a hat. Resign, resign, resign. Now the boot's on the other foot. They're not so keen to do so.
Indeed, and there's plenty of issues here that would be, I think anyone objectively could say, it's certainly a resigning issue. And, what we had with the budget and the curious timings of what Rachel Reeves knew, we talked about this on the show yesterday, what she knew and what she'd been informed about the state of the economy, and then continued to kind of sell this, we're in a terrible state, life's unimaginable if I don't, do X, Y, and Z, and sort of creating this idea that there just was no wiggle room. That's the one. We're always in debt. I mean, it's not like we were out of the woods, but there was no wiggle room. But the OBR had explicitly said, actually, there is a little bit of wiggle room here, so don't panic too much. But she led that narrative that we were royally stuffed, and then single-handedly raised welfare by about £16 billion.
And that is exactly the point, that this is a political choice to buy off our own MPs. They were, as we saw in the budget last week, absolutely delighted, waving their order papers around when she abolished the two-child limit on benefits. They were absolutely delighted. So she's bought herself time with her own MPs. This, by the way, Ian, let's not forget, this is the government that proudly said it would put country before party. What a load of baloney. This is the government that repeatedly said we're going to bring integrity and probity and honesty back into public life. What a load of old baloney. They're doing no such thing. And the people in this country are now beginning to realise that. And the opinion polls are clear. Something like 2/3 of people say that Rachel Reeves was dishonest in the lead up to the budget. So people know, we all know. The only people who don't know, Rachel Reeves and her own MPs.
Yeah, indeed. And, the fact that taxes didn't go up is no reassurance to people who've been crammed into those thresholds, who've got a bit of a pay rise, which they then realise actually it's a pay cut because the amount of tax you're now going to be paying. This is all over the place. And there's another area as well involving Starmer where people are smelling a bit of a rat, and it's over his comments yesterday calling for closer relationship with the EU to boost growth and productivity while ruling out rejoining the EU or the single market or the customs union in his lifetime. He wants reduced trade frictions without formal re-entry, despite stalled talks and criticism from the Tories and Reform. Now, of course, this is always this is a perilous journey to go on, isn't it? To try and negotiate with the EU and say, yeah, we want stronger ties that benefit us, but we don't want to sign up to any other sort of mumbo-jumbo that brings us back into the club fully or even tacitly in any shape or form. Because the EU don't play like that, Robert. The EU play a very straight bat in many respects. If you want different rules and regs, come and join us.
And there was one particularly disturbing thing from my point of view that Keir Starmer said yesterday, which is we need to keep moving forward towards a closer relationship with the EU. Well, do you remember him saying any such thing just before the last election, Ian?
No.
I certainly don't. What I remember him saying is we must make Brexit work. That was his three-word line to reassure the Red Wall.
Yeah.
You can safely vote Labour even if you voted Leave back in 2016. In other words, I'm afraid, and I hate to keep saying this about this government, it doesn't give me any pleasure that we're seeing more deceit and more flip-flopping from the Prime Minister downwards. It's all about getting back towards the EU. He, being Keir Starmer, explicitly ruled out the customs union, and now he appears to going soft on that whole idea.
Yeah.
So I think we can stand by for a big Brexit reversal, or as near as Starmer feels he can get to a Brexit reversal in the coming months or years.
It's when they get into that territory of, yep, you can join this bit of the club or that bit of the club, or by the way, you've got to have freedom of movement in order for that to happen, because that thing's come up since Brexit a few times as almost an explicit red line for the EU. Yeah, there's all sorts of business we can do, but freedom of movement is something you're going to have to look at. And of course that almost defines for many people one of the reasons why we had Brexit, that we felt freedom of movement was the problem. And for many people, of course, if you're a Remainer, then that was the most fabulous thing ever. But right now, with the immigration debate being as hot as it is, the idea that you'd suddenly say, yep, and anyone who lives in the EU can now come back over here, that would be a massive problem for him.
Yes, and I think it's also a political calculation that I think he feels he's lost all those red wallers to Reform.
Yep.
And the big part of the electorate that is still available to him are people who are strongly voting for Remain, who are now saying, oh, we might vote Lib Dem, we might vote Green. And he might be calculating the way to win them back is to row back on Brexit and to start getting back into the customs union. I wouldn't put it past Keir Starmer, I'm afraid.
Well, it's not as if they don't break pledges, because we know this already, Robert.
Well, exactly. They're the ultimate pledge breakers. And in fact, again, sorry to say, but Keir Starmer, from the moment he became leader of the Labour Party, rode back on all the pledges he made to be continuity Corbyn and from the hard left and all the rest of it. We know we cannot trust a pledge that he utters, I'm afraid.
He was going to stand on the picket lines with, doctors and all sorts of things. That's what he said. He was going to nationalise utilities. That's what he said. I mean, the list goes on. And if you said to Keir Starmer the day before the general election, will you abolish juries in certain cases where the sentence is likely to be under 3 years, he would have probably shouted at the interviewer and stormed out at the ridiculousness of the question, shouting as he ran down the road, of course I would never abolish juries. And here we are again. Listen, Robert, thank you as ever. Robert Taylor, political journalist, with us on the programme. Thank you to him. Over to you, particularly on juries, on comments on all of this, the EU stuff, Rachel Reeves, OBR, anything you like, but particularly that question on the justice system. How do we reform it? What's your experience of the jury system if you've been through it? Can you see any merits in getting rid of the jury system in certain cases? Betty says, check out the judge-led courts in Russia and China on YouTube. The only justice is left justice if we keep going this way. Need the IDF to save the UK. Red notice the entire government and all those against the norm, says Betts. And Andrew makes this point. Lammy saying having a digital system will make the prison system OK means he was asleep throughout the post office scandal, which was the establishment believing the machine. And AI will exacerbate this as well. Yeah. They literally got rid of the paper system at the post office in favour of this all-new shiny bit of kit, the Horizon model. What could go wrong? Well, you could send hundreds of people to jail for something they'd never done. And they might not even get a jury if it happened again. 0344 499 1000. We've talked to Sir Robert Buckland, KC, former Solicitor General and Northern Ireland Affairs as well. He's going to join us. He served in the Cabinet, of course, for a good few years. He knows this territory well. And David Shipley, who's a former prisoner, knows his way around the justice system, a writer and a researcher on this issue too. We'll talk to both of those voices next on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
More of your comments on the way in a couple of moments' time. This one from Katie in York. On the judge-jury discussion, I would be happy with having judges instead of a jury, but unfortunately, most judges are corrupt, says Kate. I'm not sure that's absolutely true. And feel this evil government will somehow be able to use this system against right-wingers and probably to put anyone who opposes digital ID into prison. I don't trust judges at all to make fair decisions. I'm not as cynical as I mean, there will always be judges who, you know, through their own politics, perhaps, err in a certain direction. Who knows? This is largely untested. I mean, magistrates at the moment have a certain influence within the judicial system. But I don't think it's necessarily that. I just think that the jury trial, the jury system, is just a far more demonstrably authentic and fairer system. And I think it's very hard to argue against that. Of course, David Lammy today confirming that there will be issues around this. And of course, you know, it's going to be one of those areas that there's nothing, I think, anybody can really do about it because it's going ahead. Let's speak with David Shipley. David is, of course, former prisoner, writer and researcher on prisons and justice. David, good afternoon to you.
Hi, good to be here.
Nice to have you with us. Give us your overview then, if you would, on what we've heard in the last 45 minutes.
Well, yeah, so I think it's very clear that David Lammy is going, in fact, further than Brian Levison recommended in his court review. So we're going to get these new swift courts where if you're facing a sentence of 3 years or less, you'll just be tried by a judge. Yeah. So it'll be like the continental model. You will see a judge who will determine your guilt and determine your sentence. These are estimated to be about 20% quicker than a jury trial. Courts are now going to be able to decide where they hold cases. They're going to move it around to try and find a bit more capacity in the system. He's saying he's going to guarantee jury trials for what they're calling the most serious offences. So we were told last week it might just be rape, murder, and manslaughter. So they've added aggravated burglary, blackmail, people trafficking, grievous bodily harm, these sorts of things, and very serious drug offences. And they're also going to bring in judge-only trials for very complex frauds, and they're going to increase the sentences magistrates can issue up to 18 months. You might remember a couple of years ago, these went down from 2 years to 1, and now we're moving it back up to 18 months. There's a lot of fiddling at the margins. The big change is that a lot of people facing pretty substantial prison sentences will now be tried and have their guilt and sentence determined by a judge.
I mean, some have argued that actually, a judge is a very senior lawyer. They've been through the system to get to that impressive position. You don't do that by just, filling out a swift application form down at the job centre. You have usually years of legal experience to be in that situation. And fairness, impartiality is central to what they do. Their politics are left at the door. What could go wrong?
Well, I think the thing is, the role of a jury is not to understand the law. And I've, in addition to having been on the wrong side of the law, I've also been a juror, a jury foreman. And I, as a juror, my job was to determine fact. And that's the job of every jury, that we're not there to decide the law or have any of that learning which judges bring. Jurors are just there to decide essentially who's telling the truth, what really happened. And that is a job which 12 people are eminently suitable to do, and actually are better at doing than one person, because one person, however well trained, however fair-minded, is still a single point of failure, and everyone comes with prejudices of one kind or another. And I think the role of a jury is in actually bringing fairness and common sense. And I do worry, I think a lot of the speech offences, for example, which people fought after the Southport unrest and were found not guilty on by juries, would a judge take the same view, or would a judge be more likely to come down really hard on them? I suspect that juries are much more likely to lean towards acquittal unless they're really convinced of guilt.
Well, it's interesting, as a previous caller talked about, judges getting too politicised, and I don't think with post Southport, because we also saw this in 2011 post the London riots, where there were these pretty substantial prison sentences were given out for the famous case of a guy nicking a bottle of water, I think it was, got 18 months in jail for it. There is a sense that when there is a kind of an establishment, crime against the system, it happens, if you do something a bit moody with the taxman. It certainly happens if you insult the judge or the courtroom, and it will almost certainly happen with a riotous situation where judges collectively, I've never believed the word comes down from number 10 and says, right, jail them all. But nonetheless, some people suggest it does. But there is a sort of almost a groupthink kicks in at that point, that in addition to the fact that you rioted at a time when it could cause more riots, so therefore we're going to be more serious with you. And a judge is more likely to look at it through that sort of clinical prism, I guess, than 12 individuals who would look maybe at other circumstances.
Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right. Judges are fundamentally creatures of the regime and of the establishment, and therefore they will tend to do what the regime, what the establishment thinks should happen. And we see this in these sorts of responses to riots. And we often see now, judges, when sentencing, really focusing on people's opinions, if those are opinions which are felt to be contrary to what the regime wants us to believe or believes. So I think for all those reasons, yes, I would be much less comfortable about a single judge making a decision on guilt. I think also that there's the question really of what the purpose of justice is. Is the purpose just to make trials happen as quickly as possible? Yeah. Because in that case, we can move everyone to the single justice procedure and just have judges sitting in a room looking through paperwork and never seeing defendants. Yeah. The purpose of justice is to get it right, to determine guilt and innocence. And actually, sometimes that does take a bit longer. And Lammy was saying today in Parliament, most trials don't end up anywhere near a jury. And he's right. What we really just need is more judges, more members of the criminal bar, and more court dates. And that all costs real money. So this fiddling at the edges is not going to solve the problem.
Indeed. David, thank you for your time. Good to have you with us. Writer, researcher on prison and justice issues, David Shipley's been a prisoner himself as well. So he knows his way around the system from multiple angles. This, of course, is the story that David Lammy calling for judge-only trials for offences under 3 years to tackle the nearly 80,000 case backlog. Let's have a listen to what he said on this very issue today.
There's a group of cases where you can get up to 5 years, generally speaking, They're called triable either way cases, and also where a defendant can opt to have a jury, and I'm looking at that. What I mean by that is if you steal an iPhone this afternoon from Curry's, should you be able to opt to have a jury? The trial may take 2 days, and inevitably that will cause further delay for more serious and egregious crimes like rape or murder. So that's the question that I've been looking at, and that's what I'll be announcing later on today. I want to be absolutely clear. Juries remain fundamental to our system. Over 300,000 people or so are serving in our juries every year. I'm grateful for all that work, and it remains the cornerstone of our justice system.
Let's get a word from Sir Robert Buckland KC, former Conservative Secretary of State for Justice. Robert, good afternoon to you. Nice to have you with us. Of course, you know your way around this system very well from multiple perspectives, both as a lawyer and, of course, as a senior member of the Cabinet in that very position. Can I just ask you firstly, did this file ever come across your desk as a suggestion when you were in office?
Oh, yes, it did during the COVID crisis when we had to stop jury trials, and we looked at what the country did in the war, where we reduced the number of jurors. We looked at judge and 2 magistrates, even remote juries. And in fact, the law has been changed to allow remote juries to sit. But in the end, you know, I rejected those ideas because I think that the jury system is one of our guarantors of liberty. It's that important injection of ordinary common sense, the general public being part of the system, rather than leaving it to case-hardened lawyers and judges who, you know, they're human. They're not going to get it right just as much as juries. But having addressed hundreds of juries in my long time as a criminal barrister, I don't think there's a better system.
Yeah.
And what I see today is not a sincere attempt to shorten trials, but an attempt to save money. That's what this is all about. And I'm afraid it deserves to unravel like previous proposals that we've seen in the past.
It's interesting, of course, because half an hour ago, David Lammy agreed with all of that. And then he suddenly, I don't know what happened. He went home from work one day, Robert, maybe sat there under an old Oxbridge study lamp and decided to wrestle with his inner thinkings when it comes to the law and came up with this sort of eureka moment about jury trials. It could be that, or somebody in the civil service said, you need to save a few billion quid, mate, and this is one way to do it.
I think it's the latter. The amount of time you need to think through the permutations of all this is immense. So Brian Leveson, the senior judge, former appeal judge, has done a lot of work on this. This goes well beyond his proposals. You know, I have issue with some of Sir Brian's proposals. I think actually it's going to create more work because you're going to get judges having to give reasons for their verdicts. They can be challenged. There's going to be all sorts of points here that naturally need to be allowed to be appealed. The decision of a judge themselves not to allow a jury trial, that in itself would need to be tested. I think actually they're creating more work, and that this attempt to save money should be exposed for what it really is.
And, of course, you increase the workload on magistrates by doing this as well. It's all very well saying, well, you know, we'll reduce these amount of cases going to a jury trial, we'll allow magistrates to deal with it. And magistrates' courts, as you know better than I, Robert, are already chock-a-block too, with everything from, you know, parking offences to cases that are still incredibly serious. So that workload increases, so it's sort of the air bubble effect in that respect.
Well, indeed. And, you know, this is one of the reasons why a lot of trials go up to the Crown Courts, not because defendants are playing the system. You know, the very few actually do. A lot of prosecutors just say, do you know what? We haven't got time to do this file. Let's send it upstairs to the Crown Court. Let's fling it up to them. Not on my desk anymore. Not a problem for us. And that, of course, won't happen anymore. So where's the capacity in the system, in the magistrate system, to deal with these trials? I think these are ill-thought-through proposals, even from things like this 3-year maximum. There are very few criminal sentences that actually have a statutory 3-year maximum, a phrase one. Most sentences do not have that maximum. How is a judge going to have to assess that? They're going to have to look at the file, read it carefully, and work out what the likely sentence might be. There are more questions than answers in this statement, and I do think the government is going to come for a lot of criticism, both in the Lords and, yes, in the Commons, from Labour backbenchers who are going to want answers quickly.
It's a very good point as well on the 3-year thing, because I don't believe it says, and correct me if I'm wrong, it doesn't literally say if you do this you will go to jail for 3 years. I mean, there's ballpark figures, so it could be a minimum of 18 months, it could be a maximum of 5 years. So what does a judge do with that? What does somebody looking at this do with a scenario such as that? I mean, does that come under it? Does it go over it?
Well, a judge, in effect, is going to have to do a sort of builder's quote on sentence. And that's very difficult at the outset of a trial because you haven't heard all the evidence. It might well be that there are more serious things emerge that make the sentence likely higher. The way the defendant conducts himself in the case is quite an important thing.
Of course.
There are so many permutations here that I think make this sort of dividing line quite a difficult one to police. And I really don't like the return by this Labour government to what its predecessor did in the noughties, to restrict juries in fraud cases and serious and complex trials. That's really insulting, I think, to members of the public who are being told, look, you're too thick to understand these complex cases. You shouldn't be there. Do you know, I blame poor presentation by the lawyers when jurors get lost in a case. It's up to the prosecutors to get the case clear and right. And having a jury there is a really good discipline. And I've done it. You know, I've prosecuted lots of fraud cases. You've got to ask yourself, you know, can I tell a story? Is this story actually going to stand up in front of a jury? Are they going to get what the case is all about, which is 9 times out of 10 about dishonesty? And I think that's quite a simple concept. It's been set out in law. Jurors understand it. I find it quite insulting that once again we see this Labour government say, oh, do you know what? The little people, they're not able to do these sort of cases. Let's leave it to the big grown-up judges. Very, very disturbing and not the right way to approach this issue.
Finally, Sir Robert, if you were to get a random text this evening from Mr. Lammy saying, Robert, help me, I'm in a mess here, I've got 88,000 case backlog. What's my first steps to clearing that if my new jury plan doesn't work out? What advice would you give the Justice Secretary?
I'd say to David, who shadowed me for 18 months, you've got to go to the Treasury and get some more resource because there are still too many courts that are not being used. We need also, I think, to make sure that our judges, and of course they're responsible for the listing and organisation of trials, are really ploughing through the cases, listing those cases, reviewing them and making sure that, you know, those cases that aren't going to go anywhere get out of the system. But, you know, my first point is that the justice system is priceless, but it doesn't cost anywhere as near as our health service. And when we talk about a few $100 million for the justice system, it pales into insignificance when we talk about the billions we're prepared to spend on the health service. So let's get the priorities right. If you're serious about justice and getting it right, let's actually open up more courts and get those resources in there to start bringing this backlog down.
Robert, thorough stuff. Thank you, sir, for your time. Sir Robert Buckland, KC. He is former Secretary of State for Justice. He held that position for a few years under the Johnson administration, knows his way around the system. He got collared during COVID, where nobody needs to what to do in any department, it seems, back then. That's his advice. It's money that would change the system and reduce the backlog. Your thoughts on juries versus a solo judge and your experience if you've been through the system. Our lines are open. This is Talk. Big news coming this December. Our talkTV app is moving to the Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. From Monday, 1st of December, the talkTV app will no longer exist, so don't miss out. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. David in South Wales says, if Rachel Thieves finally gets ousted for her lies, what will actually happen next? Obviously, I know she'll be replaced, but I'm thinking absolutely nothing in the long terms. What I mean is, I don't see the sitting government having a new emergency budget to put things right after all the lies. But hey-ho, you never know. And after all I just heard, after all, I just saw a herd of unicorns flying overhead. Thank you, David, for that. It's a good point. Of course, this budget, the problem with it is that Labour voters seem to really like it, and certainly Labour MPs did. Neil is down in London on juries. What have you got for us, Neil? Afternoon to you.
Hi, Ian. Big fan of the show.
Thank you.
As you would say, this is all shades of wrong in so many different ways. I mean, it really, really worries me that we're...
It's disturbing, isn't it?
I mean, you look at totalitarian states, you look at Russia, and people have mentioned this before, in Iran and China. You know, you can look at left-wing judges here. I don't know how that came about, because when I was a kid, I always thought every judge and policeman was almost a member of the National Front. So
I know, it's a bit weird, that, isn't it? And I sort of do, you know, they kind of went home at the weekend to their sort of Oxfordshire 200-acre farm. You know, it was that kind of image. These were Tories to the core.
But this is, as Buckland was just saying, this is about money. I think it's something like $2.5 billion into the court system. It's a tiny, tiny, tiny amount. And look at how this government is wasting billions and billions and billions. I mean, justice is so important that I would almost go as far as to say that, you know, they say justice denied, justice delayed is justice denied. I would rather see a victim of a mugging, and it's a horrible, horrible cause, or something like that. It's a terrible thing. But I'd rather see that court, that case be delayed or not get to court than see one person locked up who's innocent.
Yeah.
And that is what's going to happen with these hardened, and it's been shown on the magistrate systems, they do have their prejudices, whether they were prosecuting or defence barristers or both when they were barristers. When they're a judge, one person, if you've got 12 people, you've got 12 minds. And I sat on a jury when I was 23, and I was elected a long time ago, and I was elected foreman. Now, you could make your own judgments of why a 23-year-old, the youngest person there, was elected foreman. But I did find, except for one person who was doing their knitting the whole time, I can remember the lady, but apart from that, everybody really, really did take it seriously. And there are different personalities and different levels of intelligence, but that is representative of the population.
Yeah.
And if you said, just finally, I mean, if you were to say, I can't believe this government, I can't believe, you said, I'll tell you what, we're gonna shut down one newspaper. Let's say we're going to shut down The Guardian, because that doesn't really matter, because it's only got a circulation of 300,000. Oh, I don't care about that, because I never read The Guardian. In fact, I don't really like The Guardian. But I would still say absolutely wrong, because it's all the thin end of the wedge.
Yeah,
How
of course
many
it
other
is.
newspapers are there, which is what people like Adolf Hitler did. So when he talks about rape and murder, how long will it be before juries are taken away for those cases as well?
And that's, that is the problem. That is the problem. Listen, it's a great call. I'm grateful for that, Neil. Thank you very much indeed. And who does their knitting when they're on a jury? I'm assuming means in the deliberation room rather than actually in the courtroom. Thank you to Neil. On this point, Hannah says, Ian, considering many of our judges seem to be raving lefties and or Fabians, this could be a disaster. You can imagine how many possible Lucy Connollys there could be under this utter disgraceful two-tier government. It's a good point. How did we get... He did raise a good point there. The stereotype of a judge was always, and even this was inaccurate, but it was always a rich, posh Tory. How did we get to the point where we consider them all to be sort of raging lefties? I'm intrigued. Amy is in Milton Keynes. Amy, what have you got for us? Afternoon to you.
Hi. Afternoon to you. How are you doing?
Good, thanks. Yeah, far away.
So I was just thinking about the whole justice and the jury thing. So justice being fair, something that's treated fairly, consistently, and what brings kind of the morally right and the legally right together. And I think one is that of like communities and the judges and where they meet. And I think juries help in their deciding. They kind of ensure that what the law and the community standards kind of reflect, and they're the cornerstone of fairness, and protects against the groupthink, which is what you were just saying by judges who may or may not have some sort of bias or political sway. And I don't think that the backlog or the practicality of juries, whether that be in mid-level cases or any other case, should even come into question, because it's the fair principle that protects people from the state. And when the government begins to prioritise practicality, that's when the rights of the people they start to get watered down. And once you get rid of something, and we've seen this in many cases, once you get rid of something, it makes it very, very hard, almost impossible to get it back.
That's a very good point. The principle of getting rid of it can take many, many years, even decades, to get it back. And you make a really good point. I mean, it's a very fundamental point, isn't it? That, you know, the 12 people of your peers in itself is a refreshing and should be encouraged form of justice. But also a discussion among 12 people, if nothing else, as distinct from one man or woman. Amy, great call. Thank you very much indeed for that. We'll take some more in a few moments. Right now, it's 2 o'clock.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
And good afternoon. Welcome back. Yeah, it is the home of common sense. Loads to get through. We are, of course, talking David Lammy calling for judge-only trials for offences under 3-year sentences to tackle nearly 80,000 in legal backlog cases. I mean, this is an absolute outrage to anyone with half a brain cell, you might think. He says courts cannot cling on to juries for the sake of tradition. It's not about tradition, Mr. Lammy. It's about justice and the best form of justice. Nothing is perfect, This is the best of what we got. And what are you doing? Chucking it in the bin. We'll have more on that. And, of course, importantly, your responses too. And a people smuggling gang has returned an estimated 243 migrants to France in under a year, compared to 153 under Labour's one-in and one-out deal. We'll have a look at that. And West Streeting has accused striking resident doctors of attempting to wreck Christmas after they've announced a 5-day walkout between the 17th and the 22nd of December. This is their third demand this year. They are third strike this year. They are demanding a 26% pay rise. Everything you need to know, all the breaking news right here on Talk 0344 499 1000. Anne in Oakley says, getting rid of some jury trials is the thin end of the wedge. Next will be Sharia courts to, quote, save time. You can almost see it coming. And this one from Trevor in Harrow, who says, afternoon, Ian, with David Lammy getting rid of juries, in my view, it's just the beginning of a sinister plan and will affect freedom of speech and any criticism of a very unpopular government. This is piece one of a bigger jigsaw we're about to see. No one party should have the power to be able to overturn this. If this isn't a red flag to all, we are more asleep than I expected. The only thing I would say, because that's exactly how I was thinking about this, but I don't know when this will kick in. Alicia, is there any, do we have any dates of when this is penciled in to start, this jury list case? Because it might well be that it doesn't kick in for 2 or 3 years, because you think of all the pending cases we have now. And if that is the case, then Labour might be voted out of office at the tail end of that. I'm just thinking, or trying to sound optimistic. Also this afternoon, a people smuggling gang has returned an estimated 243 migrants to France in under a year, compared with 153 under Labour's one in and one out. The gang earned around £287,000 from 26 trips and was jailed for 10 years and 9 months, while critics highlight that 99% of illegal entrants since the deal have been allowed to stay. Let's get a word from our friend Tony Smith, former head of the UK Border Force. Afternoon to you, Tony.
Afternoon, Ian.
So what's going on here? People smuggling gangs returning people to France. Why are they doing that?
Yeah, actually, the Sun rang me about this one because they were a bit mystified when the story broke. What's going on, Ian, is these are Maghrebis, people from North Africa, mainly Tunisia, Morocco, Algeria, who are trying to get to France. And in order to get to France, they've got to get a Schengen visa, or a French visa, which is actually a Schengen visa, and they're being refused visas by the EU. So they're managing to get visas to come to the UK. And they do manage to get to the UK, not with the intention of staying here, but with the intention of going to France. And then once they're in the UK, they're climbing into the backs of lorries and they're smuggling themselves outbound.
Wow. So they're coming illegally into the UK to be smuggled back to France because their visa opportunities increase in that capacity or something?
Yes, correct.
Wow. I mean, this is nuts. You couldn't have written this one, Tony.
No, I did know it was going on, Ian, and I've got my sources. We don't actually, as you know, we don't actually have outbound border force checks in Dover ourselves. The French do the checks, don't they?
Yeah, of course.
Down at Dover on the outbound. So the French are pulling them out of lorries, not us.
Yeah.
And then they're throwing them over the fence to us. So that's how we found out about this. But it does raise questions, Ian, which we've spoken about the integrity of our own visa operation, doesn't it? Because we are giving visas to people who we shouldn't be giving visas to. Correct. From that part of the world. And we've already spoken, Ian, before about the number of visa holders that are now in the asylum system who are coming over here ostensibly to visit or study, and then as soon as they get here, claim asylum. Now, the visa system is our first line of defence, right?
Yeah,
it is a customer service. We do need to issue visas to people. We want people to come here and spend their dollars. But on the other hand, it is our first line of defence. If we are weakening our visa system, we are undermining the integrity of our entire border system. And I think that's the real story here.
And, of course, the other sort of slightly, I mean, this is not just being mischievous and having a pop at the Labour parties or the Labour government's policies, but it's quite interesting when you consider that the figures tell us that 243 migrants went back to France this way, which is nearly 100 more than we've sent back through the one-in, one-out scheme, which isn't worth the paper it's written on.
Yeah, that's one way of looking at it. I suppose the one in, one out. So we've spoken about that before. It seems to be one in and quite a few, well, quite 1,000 in, isn't it, Ian?
Yeah.
I think you worked it out before to prevent a one out. I mean, so we do. At least we are getting the odd person back to France, but it's nowhere near enough to act as the removals deterrent we all need. So yeah, that's not really working at the moment, anyway.
It isn't, and some of them, of course, have come back even once they've gone on the out. Then they've jumped on another boat and returned.
Yeah, but we do pick them up on the biometrics, so we can, identify them. But the real problem, as we've discussed before, is that at the moment, we get a lot about removals figures, saying we sent 50,000 people back or something. We analyse those figures, there's a lot of work done on those. Only a very small number of people arriving by a small boat have been returned, Ian, about 4%. And that's because they claim asylum. It's really, really hard to remove asylum seekers from this country. Much easier to remove overstayers or people that have, come in and just decided to go back after having overstayed their visa and Voldepts, etc. But asylum is the problem. We need asylum removals targets. I had those when I was in UKBA. My feet were in the flames. You have to remove failed asylum seekers, which means refusing asylum, getting them out of the country quickly to send that deterrent message. And we're not actually removing failed asylum seekers. And that is why we've still got this huge problem with the small boats.
It is just extraordinary. I mean, to suggest it's a mess sort of just understates it in the most catastrophic sense. Tony, thank you as ever. Tony Smith, former head of the UK Border Force. Over to you, 0344 499 1000. The announcement that David Lammy gave doesn't carry with it an exact start date for the restrictions that have been specified. Legislation is expected soon, with reforms designed to begin reducing backlogs by 2029, aligning with projections for peak caseload. So this implies there'll be a kind of phased rollout of this over the next few years. But of course, you've got parliamentary approval required, you've got cabinet sign-offs required. The Labour backbenchers will probably vote for this because it came from David Lammy and they want their government to succeed. But there could be, just to answer the previous question that was raised, or the previous text we got, by the time this has any sort of meaningful teeth, there could be a new government in power, who you would hope would simply undo this on day one. Adam is in Nottingham on this point. Adam, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I just wanted, you set the challenge out, what would you do differently? Well,
yeah, how would you refashion our system?
Well, there's nothing much different I would do to it, but I'll add to it. But I know one thing, if I ever did something naughty and I didn't get judged, I didn't have a jury, I would demand that because I wouldn't recognise the power of the court. But the only other thing I can think about adding to it is technology. Is we do not allow lie detector evidence to be put in as evidence. And I do think with the way technology is and what I know about lie detectors, they're very, very hard to cheat. And they can only really be cheated by psychopaths anyway, but they're very hard. But I think that sort of evidence should be included, not convicted off that, just that evidence, have the other evidence. But I do believe that evidence is potent, and I think it will help get people to the truth faster and learn what they need to be looking at quicker. So I do think that evidence should be included.
I mean, it's funny talking about technology. I mean, AI is, it's widely suggested will be the ultimate judge in years to come.
Yeah, I don't think you should remove human decisions, though, from people's lives.
What if AI is proven to be...
very cold.
What if it's proven to be better, Adam? More efficient, more accurate?
If it's proven to be better, it should be considered. But the end-all decision shouldn't be removed from people, I think. And I don't believe one person, because I'm a big believer in, I don't think one person should have the power. One person should never be in charge. It should be a couple of people that have to answer to each other.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you never know. You can get biased jury, but there's 12 of them.
But you've got to...
get by. Yeah.
Exactly. And I think, look, the number 12, the amount we have on a jury, is seems to be a sort of a reasonable selection, numerically, to be able to hold a discussion and a debate. I mean, if you had 50 on a jury, it'd be carnage, right? You'd never get anywhere. But 12 does seem to be... a fairly considered number to be able to thrash out the information you've been given by two senior lawyers in a court case, guided by a judge for anything that you don't understand, and you can chew the fat on that. You can have a debate about that. Now, a judge, even a well-intentioned judge, as a solo voice, I can't imagine, and bearing in mind it's not a judge's job to decree guilt, it's a judge's job to walk you through the law and to explain, if needed, the intricacies or the complications of a certain case. Now, so with the best respect to the judge, who could be tip-top and about as impartial as it gets, I don't think that judge could ever beat those 12 people.
No, like you say, he's there as a guide. I mean, the 12 people know nothing, and that's why he's there. He's the professional. He knows everything. But you cannot just stand in judgment of everyone yourself. One person should never do that. And like I said, if you've got a jury, if you've got 2 biased juries or 2 racist juries, they're going to be stamped out by the other 10 who just say, no, you're just being unreasonable. I don't think he's guilty just because of that, you know, or anything like that. And I think that can be stamped out and with reasonable doubt. And I think that should always be the case. Technology should be brought in, yes, but never completely relied on. It's too cold. It's too cold.
I agree with you, Adam. Thank you for that. I certainly, I think most people go, yeah, we don't want technology or a computer working it out. But when you think ahead 20 years, when it is widely recognised that the AI capabilities are superior to human thought. I know this is terrifying stuff, sounds a bit dystopian, but, you know, don't let anybody tell you this is not the direction of travel, because it obviously is. You get to that point and it ticks all the boxes. It doesn't just tick, here's the evidence, it has empathy built in to the algorithm, it has nuance built in there, possible alternative outcomes, you know, whatever boxes need to be ticked, this AI beast has got the whole thing sorted out. And then it comes to making a decision, which would be proven, this would be the case in favour of AI, proven to be far more authentic, effective, considered and intelligent and objective than any other form, i.e. the human form. True or false? Caroline is down in London, removing juries. What are you making of it, Caroline? Good afternoon to you.
Hi, good afternoon. Lovely, as always, to speak to you. Great show.
Thank you.
Okay, it's really weird. Well, not weird. I watched a film at the weekend called 12 Angry Men.
Yeah, famous.
I don't know if you've heard of it.
Yeah.
The famous film with Henry Fonda.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone should watch it. Absolutely brilliant. Okay, I know it's slightly different, but most of the people on the jury were racist, and it was only Henry Fonda, the character, that voted, you know, not to, you know, the whole process about asking questions, really looking at it. We remove this, it is the end of our freedom. Without a shadow of a doubt, people are going to go to prison that shouldn't be. We also know that right now, you know, there is a two-tier system in this country. We're full of left judges, and God knows what. We hear that all the time. How dare this government, this Lammy, who's got 2 P's in his brain, how dare they take 800 years of this law? You know, we're going down a totalitarian road, and people need to wake up, and I pray to God this is not going to get through, because this is serious. This is very serious, and we won't have a voice. We won't have anything. They are literally eroding the British population bit by bit with our free speech, with the legal system, and all they need to do, there are judges who want to judge on court cases and are willing to do more days, and they're not being allowed to, and courts are not open long enough. Got nothing to do with it. It's about taking our voice, our freedom, our legal freedom away. They're just doing what they want.
It does, it literally, terrifying is the right word. Caroline, thank you for that, and thank you for reminding us that 12 Angry Men is a movie you must see if you haven't done already. Where does this go? What is the thinking behind it? Lammy says it's going to speed stuff up, it's going to take a great amount of slack out of the system and tighten things up so you reduce those court times. I mean, just on that one basis alone, I can't help but think that you might save some days here and there, but you are going to then put that workload back to magistrates' courts. And I know there's issues there with how often magistrates sit. I think some do a Saturday morning. I think they might do, but you'd be doing 7 days a week. In fact, you should be doing 7 days a week anyway in these kind of cases. Not each individual person, obviously, but they should be functioning 7 days a week, but so should doctors and all manner of other healthcare elements should be running right 24/7, 7 days a week. You know, get those clinics open, get those bunions lanced, or whatever the heck you do with a bunion, sorted out. This comes in from Kevin in Barnstable. I think Lammy's careless attitude to the history of the English legal system is founded on the fact that it goes to the heart of British culture, something that he has little time for because of his own racial heritage, says Kevin. Dav says, what about the French? They rarely, if at all, use juries, and that system is widely seen as unparalleled. Well, they don't just... I mean, that's the system they've always had, as I understand it. I think a Casey explained this to us the other week, last week, I think it was Chris Dorr. But they don't just have one person. They do have, I think, there's two other advocates that sit there as well in some form of judgment too. So it's, you know, it's slightly different in that respect. But of course, what one place once had or does have is not necessarily an equivalence of what we currently have. And we currently have a system that is not always perfect, and sometimes it throws up a stinker of a verdict. We know that. That's part and parcel, sadly, of human life. But broadly speaking, it's the best we've got. It's the best we've got. And who's torn it up? So that a big legal brain that's come at this after years of diligent research? No. David Lammy, that bloke from North London, the old socialist. Really? Yeah, that's where we've got to, kids. 0344 499 1000. Big news coming this December. Our talkTV app is moving to the Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. From Monday, 1st of December, the talkTV app will no longer exist, so don't miss out. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
One in here from no name given. My worry is that there are activist judges out there that we all know about. If Lucy Connolly had gone to a jury trial, she'd have probably been found not guilty. So many about judges have been found. So many about judges have got very strong political views. It's probably a typo there. Is this a way of policing online comments that people make? I don't think they would have, even by the standards of this lot, I don't think they would have gone to all that trouble because of a few people that say some stuff on social media. So, by the way, things you say online can be a criminal offence. Well, there's no doubt about that. No one's disputing that. Whether you go to jail for them is a whole other issue. But that's a wider discussion about jail and the justice system more than it is about social media. If you consider, writing, I'm going to kill Bob at number 43 Acacia Avenue at 6:30, do you fancy coming to join me? Then that would be a criminal offence and you'd pay a certain price for that. If you say, as Connolly did, something racist, that is a criminal offence, and it's incitement, that's a criminal offence, and it all kind of put together creates a pretty unpleasant narrative. No one's defending, by the way, and least of all Lucy Connolly. She completely apologised and said it wasn't something she wished she'd done. So she deleted it because she was aware of how bad it was that she'd written. But pleading guilty and being at a magistrate rather than a Crown Court meant that she was sent to Pokey along with other people who'd committed similar kind of offences. I absolutely agree. I think a jury trial would have looked at more detailed evidence on that, and they wouldn't have necessarily... I mean, the difficulty is you could be found, you might be guilty of the offence. In this case, to me, it's about jail time. Is jail the right response for her offence? And the answer is no. Of course it isn't. It's ridiculous that she went to jail. There could have been other ways to deal with that. I don't know, curfew, tags, whatever you want to call it. But jail for 31 months? Get out of here. Vince is in Hampshire. Vince, what have you got for us? Good afternoon.
Hello, Ian.
Hi.
Hiya. I mean, a lot of what I was going to say has already been said. What I was going to say was 2 words, Lucy Connolly. And I just think if this goes ahead, we're heading down a really dystopian route. I mean, there's no doubt that a lot of the judges, I won't say all of them, because you can't obviously tie them all the same brush, but they are left-leaning. There's no doubt about it.
How did we get to that? Just on that very point, how did we get to that, Vince? Because you might have heard somebody earlier said, when they were growing up, and certainly, in fact, beyond growing up, your image of a judge was a sort of landowning Tory, who was chauffeured around from court to court to stick his wig on and preside over cases. He was probably friends with the Tory Prime Minister. That was the stereotype.
Yeah, and it was. And I think, it goes back to something else which was mentioned, which is the Fabian Society. When you look... I look back through my lifetime, I'm 55. And I remember in the 70s, sort of in my primary school, my junior school, teaching was very different. And then as I got into my teens, I kind of noticed, I don't know, this almost, what I would look at now and say is a more left-wing narrative coming into the education system. And that's moved on generationally.
Do you not think that's always been there, though, in teaching? That teachers have always been disproportionately left-leaning? No. When I look back, I can pick out teachers that were definitely not that way. Yes. But, I mean, are we talking about... I mean, you are individuals... are allowed to have their own views, of course. Nobody is disputing that. But when you're a judge, you're meant to... It's like when you're a journalist, you leave that at the door. If you're a newsreader or you're an executive at the BBC, you're meant to leave that at the door. And the good ones are able to do that brilliantly, and that's still the case. But you only need a couple of wrong-uns who make the wrong shout, see Panorama for details, and you're absolutely knackered. Because distrust... nobody says, I distrust Bob that worked as an editor on Panorama. They distrust the BBC, right? It's the whole institution comes with it.
But it does. You have to... That's unfortunately the way you've got to look at it. And I think if you put this whole no trial by jury, one person makes a decision...
Yeah.
the judges have got ideologies and they are left-leaning. So what do you do?
But how do we know they're left-leaning? How do we know that?
Because you've only got to look at what's gone on previously, where I'm just trying to think of an example for you, but there have been many where...
But I mean, a judge can jail a right-winger.
Yeah,
that doesn't mean that they're a left-winger because they jailed a right-winger, right?
Absolutely not. That's passing a judgment.
Yeah.
But then look at it this way. Let's think about Justice Boyle. How many of those people went to court for throwing something over a painting or the other one disrupted the snooker? It was there on film that they'd done it, and yet they still let them off.
Well, I don't know if they all got let off, but I mean, it's fair to say that the head of Just Stop Oil is serving a 7-year prison sentence at the moment, and, you know, longer than any of those kind of rioting cases, or most of them. So, I mean, there are nuances in it. I get it. Listen, and also, you know, somebody said to me recently, if you ever want to commit a crime without going to jail, then vandalism is the one, because no one will send you to jail. You can be caught downloading child pornography and not go to jail now.
Yeah, I mean, that in itself...
I have no idea how that could be the case. Well, in fact, I know the answer to that, and that is there are too many people in jail and going up before judges or magistrates for that very offence. Vince, thank you, mate, for that. Great to have you on. 0344 499 1000. Trevor says, is it just me or did anybody else just assume that we would always have a jury system and it was never even up for discussion? Yeah. This seemingly came out of nowhere. I guess this is why we need a written constitution and the Magna Carta and enshrined in our British law. It won't always work, of course. There'll be cases where some might say, you know, a jury system still delivered the wrong verdict. And of course, you know, sadly, those cases happen. No one is going to defend that. But they are rare, thankfully. They are rare. David's in Gloucestershire on this issue of the jury. What's the answer to this, David? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Ian. How are we all?
Yeah, good as gold at this end. Fire away.
That's good. That's good. Well, they're talking about this 80,000 plus backlash. However many's in the system, and they can't get through. Well, I don't think getting rid of juries is the answer. I mean, it is quite frightening, you know. And I think under this particular government, you know, they're talking about electronic ID and different things, and everybody's, you know, and I think they are the most dystopian government we've ever had in this country, or certainly in, you know, living memory.
Yeah.
But to get rid of the court backlog is very, very simple. If you go to court, I've been to a couple of courts, you know, for a couple of different things. Not me personally. Well, one was sort of a family court. Another one was a case, you know, I was involved in an health and safety case. And I mean, even in that case, it was a single judge. I know she was only reading the, what do you call it? You know, the sentencing.
Yeah.
You know, but she hadn't read the notes. She hadn't read, you know, I'd given a statement for my stuff, and she hadn't read the notes. So that's a classic case of what the mistakes are. You know, but the other thing, well, I just said to your researcher earlier, I just said, well, if they want to speed the cases up, courts should sit for longer. I'm not saying, I'm not saying the case for the day, but do 2 cases a day. Why don't they start at 8 o'clock? You know, you go to court, it's 10 o'clock, then they have a coffee, then they have a lunch, then they're knocking on the head at 3:30, 4 o'clock. Well, why don't you start at 8, get the first case through by 1 o'clock, you know, have a bit of a break while they have a bit of a clean-up, get going again at 2 o'clock and go on till 6 o'clock.
Well, you'd think so. I was listening to somebody who was saying they were on a jury and they finished for lunch. I think it was a Friday or something, and they were all ready to come back to after lunch for the remainder of the day. And the judge said, no, we're going to stop here. We'll resume on Monday. Because the judge, the smart money suggested the judge wanted to get away for the weekend. Now, that's no way of doing things.
Well, this is the case. And the other thing is, I did think, you know, when you see some of these cases, I've been watching a podcast, and it was Scotland Yard Confidential, if you read it. But you see these, and I know it's back in the, you know, there's some very interesting cases for the last sort of 150 years.
Yeah.
And everything. But you see some of these murder cases, and they're all done in a week, and people end up being, you know, hung over it. And I don't say we want to go back to that. I'm not going to argue that one. But maybe we need to go to a case where, right, in 90% of the cases, you know, why does it go, you know, these very, very long cases that go on for weeks and weeks and months, Why don't you have a sort of highlighted package, 2 weeks maximum on any case for a jury?
Yeah.
And the judge, the lawyers can present all the main points to the jury, because I don't believe that a jury hears all the points. I mean, if I wouldn't want to be sat there for 6 months or more, 3, 4, you see some of these cases. I saw one the other day, somebody we know, and they're sort of saying, well, it's going to go on for 3 weeks, and another one, it's going on for 8 weeks. Really? Do you really think the jury are going to listen to 8 weeks worth of evidence and all the ins and buts? I don't believe it.
Well, yeah, I mean, I get it. And you can have a bad jury, of course you can, or you can have certain members of a jury that are, just not particularly effective, but still get the, the deciding vote, as it were. David, thank you very much indeed. What David's done there, though, is it does highlight the complexities of this one. Bo makes the point that if Lucy Connolly was guilty by her own admission of inciting racial hatred, and a jury found her not guilty, then how is that justice? Well, that's where it gets tricky, isn't it? Because there's a tweet that was out there that was... You'd have to... I suppose the key would be, did she literally incite racial hatred? And I think the magistrates court that heard the case, when she pleaded guilty to it, perhaps I think in her own words, she thought it would be a lesser sentence if there's a prison sentence at all. But you'd have to prove in a jury trial that she literally incited it. She might have said it, and it might have been ugly and unfortunate, but did anyone literally feel incited by the tweet to then go out on subsequent days and do horrible things? The magistrates, when sentencing at that time, were looking at kind of, if you like, an overarching narrative, that if you were caught up in that, then you were all bloody responsible for being part and parcel of a malaise of rioting that sent some people quivering. It sent coppers into hospital because they were brutally attacked, the whole thing. And you got swept up in it, and no one's going to defend that, but that's what I think happened. I keep going back to 2011 when something similar happened then as well. 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk, just gone 25 to 3. We're going to go back to more of your calls and comments in just a moment. Now, West Streeting is accused striking resident doctors of attempting to wreck Christmas as they announce a 5-day walkout from the 17th to the 22nd of December. This is the third this year. They're looking for a 26% pay rise. The government says they've already had a 28.9% increase, while the NHS warns repeated strikes could create a £250 million funding gap. And, of course, there's patient safety to be considered. Let's speak with Dr. Dean Eggett, GP and CEO of Doncaster Local Medical Committee. Dean, good afternoon to you. Always good to get your views on this kind of stuff. I mean, this is resident doctors rubbing people's noses in it, isn't it? Just the week before Christmas, they're downing tools.
It really does feel like the public are being held hostage here, doesn't it? The worst time of the year to do it. We know, or there are predictions, that this winter is going to be one of the harshest in a very, very long time, perhaps even in the last decade. We've already seen resident doctors get a small pay rise, and we can argue about the size of that in terms of percent, but actually in terms of their overall pay, it's not huge. So there's an argument for them to have a higher pay rise. But the challenge here is about how they're going about it. Resident doctors have this terrible task of dealing with patients in the most dire of circumstances, with poor pay, ridiculous hours to work. And I suppose at some stage we could talk about this state of the NHS as it is. So they're not working under brilliant circumstances. They deserve a pay rise, but holding the country to hostage in this way is just not appropriate. 1.5 billion so far, these walkouts have cost the taxpayer, expected now to be another 300,000, taking us up to almost 2 billion over our 14 walkouts. This is insane.
What is the rationale, as far as you can tell, Dean, for this, what looks certainly to the outside like an unrealistic pay request? 26%, the government pointing out, well, there's already been an almost 30% pay increase. Depending on who you talk to, every now and again, a doctor will come on and say, yeah, but when you break down all the numbers and everything, we're working for about 25p an hour or something, and we're in food banks for half the week. You hear that sort of argument. Now, of course, we can talk about how going forward doctors can earn much more money if they specialise, or whatever area they go into, they become, I don't know, a CEO of a local medical committee maybe, or whatever it is they happen to do. There's a lot of potential there, and sort of a job pretty much, as long as you stay on the right side of the law, which doctors tend to do, a job for life. So are there any circumstances in this, despite you not being, particularly enamoured by the idea of striking, have they actually got a point in what they're requesting?
Yes, actually, resident doctors do have a point. So in the early years of being a resident doctor, the pay is low. You can get equal pay by working in some shopping centres as you can do as being a resident doctor. But being a resident doctor, you're working extremely long hours over the week. You're making decisions that will risk people's lives. You do so actually with pretty low respect nowadays. And what you said a moment ago about having a job for life is just not the case. Actually, I qualified during extremely challenging times when the ratio for a job might be something like 5 to 1. Nowadays, actually, it's going to be at least 10 to 1 for a doctor to actually get onto a training scheme that will allow them to go through to a consultant post. So there is no guarantee at the moment that an early years training doctor will have any definite ability to get a job that takes them on to be a consultant. So if you have lowish pay at the early years, job insecurity, no guarantee that you're going to get a job at all, with terrible working conditions, why would you stay to work in England? And I suppose that's the point where I would say to resident doctors, I'm on board with you. I agree. We need to look after you. We need to pay you well. We need to want to keep you here to keep the health of the nation in good state. As you've said, if you get onto the training scheme, you do become a senior doctor, your circumstances change quite significantly. But in those early years, the state of affair for resident doctors is pretty terrible. But if you compare that to opportunities that you have in Australia, New Zealand, Canada, the question is, well, why would you stay?
But you still don't believe, despite all of that, you don't believe that striking in this way is the right answer?
No, because striking is essentially holding the government and ultimately taxpayers to ransom. As I've said, this is not only harming patients. Now resident doctors and the British Medical Association will tell you that this doesn't harm patients. Now, when they say that, what they're looking at is, do we see that patients die at increased rates during these strikes? And the answer is no. Patients do not die at increased rates during these strikes. But what we do know is that patients are held in queues waiting for their care. So in terms of harm, we have patients who have to tolerate pain and and changes to their life for very prolonged periods of time as a consequence of these strikes. Now, that's harm number one. Harm number two, I've already said we're getting to 2 billion in economic damage now as a consequence of these strikes. And we all know that we can't afford economic damage to this country. And we know that economic damage results in worse health for the nation. So do these strikes cause harm? Absolutely. Should junior doctors therefore be striking? Absolutely not.
I mean, you said they don't cause death, but I mean, surely there is always that potential. I mean, the ramifications and the knock-on effects and the tentacles of a lot of resident doctors downing tools could ultimately surely have that effect, Dean.
Well, interestingly enough, the research and evidence shows that's not the case. But the reason why that's not the case is because the NHS has mitigating actions. So the NHS pays for other doctors to come in to look after patients. It pays for senior doctors to be on site more to look after patients.
Okay.
And it cancels high-risk circumstances. So the risk is removed from the NHS during periods of strike, but at the cost to the taxpayer.
Got it. Listen, on that point, Dean, thank you very much for your time as ever. Dr. Dean Eggett regularly helps us out with kind of health matters on the doctor strike issue. He's a GP. He's also the CEO of the Doncaster Local Medical Committee. Your thoughts on that? It's very hard, isn't it? It's like one of those professions. I'm not saying doctors and MPs are of the same ilk, but trying to garner kind of sympathy from people who are in a career that is, in all likelihood, going to be a fairly fruitful one. Whether you dip your toe into working in the private sector, whether you kind of move around into other capacities, whether you become the boss of your local GP practice. There's all of these other areas that can clearly hike your wage, and in some cases substantially so. Back to your calls. This will be Francis in Doncaster on doctors. What do you think, Francis? Good afternoon.
Oh, good afternoon, Ian. It's nice to be with you.
You too.
There is one word that I've yet to hear in connection with this or any other dispute from professional bodies, and that's vocation. It used to be regarded as a vocation or a calling to go into medicine, the church, the law, all of these things. It wasn't just a means of getting ahead. I mean, yes, eventually go through all the training and everything you expect to, and you come out at the other end and you're several rungs further up the ladder than the rest of us, poor stiffs. They seem to have forgotten this idea that it's a higher thing to look after your fellow suffering humanity than it is just to have an ordinary job. There's every validity in having an ordinary so-called job, but we don't expect the advantages and the respect that these folk expect.
It's interesting, the vocational point doesn't get mentioned a lot, and I suppose it's a hard sell, isn't it? If you and I were to turn up at one of these picket lines and say this to a doctor to their face, they would probably come back with something like, yeah, it is a vocation, but does that mean somebody should take the pee out of me when it comes to how much money I earn?
Well, I don't know if they think they're a special case or anything, but I mean, I worked all through COVID. I'm not unusual in that, and I'm sure all these good people who were working from home and doing whatever they did, who were continually ordering goods from a well-known online retail organisation, which is named after a river in South America. I'm sure they were jolly glad that we were still working, but I don't suppose they gave us a thought. There was no vocation involved. Our employers organised it for us to go in. We went in. Two good things about that. The roads were empty and petrol was cheap. So I had no problem with that whatsoever.
Yeah, the one advantage of that time, the empty roads, wasn't it? Listen, great call. Francis, thank you very much indeed for that. Back to jury trials and David Lammy. The London oil trader says Supreme Leader Comrade David forgot to mention that he's also going to appoint the judges. I'm not sure about that, but I wouldn't put it past them. Wouldn't that be something? And he says, I question Lammy's authority to do this with the stroke of a pen at this moment, in such a moment in time. Such a monumental change should go through the Commons, Lords and Royal Assent. I think I don't know what the process on this is. There's so many parts of parliamentary procedure that clearly if you're bringing in a new law, then you have to put it through it's got to go through the House of Commons, it's got to go to the House of Lords, it's bounced back, there's amendments thrown in, there's the original paper, and then there's all the papers that subsequently follow, and that is time-consuming to do all of that. There are other decisions a government can make where you don't have to go through the entire process. You can change certain mechanisms of how things work without it being a law. Now, I don't know whether the right to trial by jury is written down in, well, we don't have a written constitution, but I don't know where within the labyrinthine world of the law it says that to the point that you'd have to get parliamentary approval to change it. But from what I understand, there is definitely going to be a parliamentary procedure before this can go anywhere. So that'll be up and down. Unfortunately, Labour have a stonking majority, so that's likely to go through in their favour. Beyond that, however, it's just the ramifications of the logistics of changing the system of this size. It couldn't be done like, OK, from next Monday, bang. They would have to do this in a sort of, bit by bit way, I'd imagine. Again, not sure how you would implement that, but I understand that to be the case. And it might well be that this could take a good few years before it catches and you realise this is the new system, by which time we'll be, a whisper away from a general election, and this lot will be flipping history. Kaz says team jury on this one. Oh, in fact, I just literally lost that message as I started to read it. I'll come back to that in a couple of moments' time. 0344 499 1000. Big news coming this December. Our talkTV app is moving to the Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. From Monday, 1st of December, the talkTV app will no longer exist, so don't miss out. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, 0344 499 1000. Before we go any further, before we go back to your calls, Voice of Doom, day 14. It's the mystery voice, but it's political. I'll say it again. It could be left-wing, right-wing, young, old, dead or alive. Very simple task. Who is this?
Rightly and properly.
Can we hear that again?
Rightly and properly.
Not a sniff so far. These things have, again, sounding like a stuck record. We've had some really difficult voices of doom that have gone in about a day or two. We're not yet at the record, which is 20-odd days. We're not giving clues at the moment, because the last time we did that, even though it was a very tacit clue, it went immediately. But this one's day 14. Here it is again.
Rightly and properly.
If you think you know who that is, 87222. 87222. Don't phone on it, because there ain't no prize. 87222 is where you'll find us. Here it is one more time.
Rightly and properly.
Rightly and properly. Who's saying that? Back to your calls. Junior doctors, Tristan in Bolton. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. Very
Good.
well. I was just listening to your conversation that you had with the gentleman just before the break, about the gentleman saying that, that junior doctors weren't well paid, and, in comparison to who, though? I mean, if you compare a junior doctor's pay to somebody in the military, a private soldier in the military, they're on about £15,000 a year more. Now, I'm not saying that a private soldier is as highly trained in that sort of thing as a doctor, but they're highly trained.
Yep.
I'm ex-military. I used to get an extra 50 pence a day for risking my life every day in Northern Ireland. A junior doctor is on far more than what I was back then. They're on far more than a police constable, a new police constable.
Mm-hmm.
They're on far more than somebody in the fire service.
Yeah.
So, yeah, they deserve the money, but to go out on strike and want another 20-odd% pay increase on what they already get, that's a joke.
Their argument, which I've always thought was a bit of a weird argument, because there is that expectation that wages will always rise with inflation, the cost of living. So their argument broadly, and I'm probably terribly misquoting them here, but it's on the lines of they've actually had a pay cut because they didn't get a rise for so many years, that it's just bringing them back to normal. That's what they contend. Now, I'm a self-employed person. I've never run my life assuming that my wages will go up in line with inflation every year, but clearly they do.
But the other thing is, as well, Ian, is when you're becoming a doctor, you know what you're getting into. You know what your salary is going to be. You've made that choice.
Yeah.
The same way that I made the choice when I joined the army. I knew I'd be going over to Northern Ireland. I knew I'd only be getting 50 pence a day extra, but I still chose to do it. Could you imagine the police saying, I want to go on strike because I'm not getting enough money? The fire service, the fire service did years ago, didn't they? I was actually on the strike when they did it in 1995, the last time. We're going on strike. The Army, the Navy, the RAF, we're going on strike because we're not getting enough money. We're risking our lives every day. I'm not getting paid enough for that. It wouldn't happen. So why should doctors be allowed to do it? They know what they're getting into.
Well, it's not listen, they're not all inexperienced doctors, I understand that, but you're absolutely right. I don't think, given the wider story of being a successful clinician, doctor, I think the advantages ultimately, are there for all to see, and that's why I think it's a hard sell to convince members of the public to stand with them. Listen, Tristan, thank you very much indeed for that. Let's go back to David Lammy and co. Brian, somewhere in Northern Ireland. Where are you, Brian?
Hello, Ian.
Hi, whereabouts are you?
I'm in a little place called Port of Rogay, which is a small sea fishing village.
Good work. Glad to have you with us. What are you thinking? David Lammy and co.
I had 30 years as a prison officer in Northern Ireland through the Troubles. I also taught young offenders NVQ to level 3. I took out work parties of 10 and 12 at a time, both females, males. I took prisoners to jail, top terrorist prisoners to court, to hospital. In the 30 years, I never lost a prisoner.
Yeah.
And in the 30 years I was there, the staff who released the prisoners were prison officers, not civil servants.
Yeah. Do you think that's where one of the problems about these people seeming to leg it from prison? Well, not leg it. They don't need to. They're being released by the system. You think there's a lack of experience is leading to that problem?
Commitment would be a better word. The guys that I worked with were kept in the reception area. Reception brought them in and released them, and they never changed. They were never taken out of that position, and they were put in that position for one reason, because of their honesty and their integrity. Unfortunately, we don't have that in the prison service anymore.
That's interesting, isn't it? So that the system itself is
that aren't earning enough.
Yeah.
And they won't put themselves on the line for cheap money.
And why would you for cheap money?
Well,
I mean, it's not a job that doesn't require a great deal of, well, as you rightly said, experience and integrity as well. Listen, Brian, thank you very much indeed for that. Another great call. More where that came from, 0344 499 1000. Don in Chelmsford says, where are we heading? No juries for certain cases, digital ID, ministers telling lies, uncontrolled immigration, solar panels in our fields. Did we vote for this, says Don. No, I mean, not all of that, by the way, was even in their manifesto. Certainly nothing on juries, not to my knowledge. No, it definitely wasn't in the manifesto. I mean, this is almost, it feels like it's come out of nowhere. In fact, it probably did, given that they've only been in power for, what, less than 18 months. So for something as seismic as this to suddenly get announced today in Parliament, something you might think would take many years of investigation and research and speaking to all the central characters, looking around the world at different systems, how they've worked, has anyone ever had a jury system and then got rid of a jury system? Some places never had one, but do have a successful judicial system. You'd have to look at all of that. I don't believe Lammy has done all that due diligence in the short amount of time he's been in office. And by the way, David Lammy himself has only been Justice Secretary for about 4 months. It's about 16 weeks in the job. And he's ditching juries. I mean, that's in any other regime, that would be the work of a madman. People would be phoning up, going, have you heard what Lammy's up to? You need to take him away. You need to get the paramedics round there, get the straitjackets out. He's gone bananas. He's gone absolutely loopy. He's getting rid of juries. He's only been there 5 minutes. What's wrong with the man? You might think something like that would have happened. But today, suited and booted, he announced this in the Houses of Parliament. By way of a gear change, here's the voice of doom.
Rightly and properly.
87222 if you think you know. Let's get the news headlines.
Across the UK on on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is indeed Talk. 0344 499 1000. Lots to get on with in this last hour. We are, of course, still going to continue to focus on David Lammy, and why we would not, because he's calling for judge-only trials for offences that would carry an under 3-year or less sentence. This is to tackle, he says, it won't do this, by the way, the 87,000 case backlog, saying courts cannot cling on to jury trials for the sake of tradition. Mr. Lammy, you're the Justice Secretary. I know you've not been there very long and you're not very experienced and you're also not that good as a politician, but surely even you could understand this is not about tradition like a London red bus or a Christmas tree. This is about justice and the best form of authentic justice for individuals. Surely even Lammy could have worked that one out. Hopeless. Also this afternoon, Sir Keir Starmer has warned that China remains a national security threat to the UK, even as his government seeks to improve ties. More on that in just a moment. And police have admitted they used a fictitious football match in the report that led to the ban on fans of Maccabi Tel Aviv ahead of that game against Villa last month. This is getting almost darker by the day. What went on here? Details to come. 0344 499 1000. This comes in from Paul in York. Good afternoon. Reference Lammy and more prisoners being released early. We should be more concerned about prisoners released on licence, breaching their licence conditions, but then not returned to prison. The number is huge. That's a great point. There's perhaps a story waiting to break there on the amount that break the rules but never go back. And I would imagine those numbers far exceed those that have been released in error. And Barbara says removing juries is simply a way of increasing government control over the population. There will be a lot more Lucy Connollys, a lot more Ricky Joneses. The correct judge, in verticals, will be assigned, i.e. those whose views align with the government. The next to go will be the right of appeal. Of course, multiple appeals will still be the norm for asylum cases. I mean, it's a cynical view, but I tell you what, you can't help but sometimes go in that direction. I get you, Barbara. Thank you very much indeed for that. A moment to talk about China here. Keir Starmer has warned that China does remain a national security threat to the UK, even as his government decides to improve ties. In his Guildhall foreign policy speech, he said ignoring the world's second largest economy will be a dereliction of duty, and rejected the idea of a simple golden age versus ice age approach to China. Who's right and who is wrong on this? Let's speak with Jaya Patak, who is External Relations with the Interparliamentary Alliance on China. Good afternoon, Jaya. Nice to have you with us.
Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. So, I mean, let's get this out the way first of all. Is China a threat?
Absolutely, and these aren't just the words of us who are working in the China space. These are the words of our intelligence and security services. This is something that's well acknowledged by parliamentarians across the British political spectrum, and also by our allies as well. And the Prime Minister has referred to China being a national security threat, which is why when we talk about a strategy to do with China, we're trying to ensure this underpins our approach to China. If we're willing to recognise that it is a threat to our national security, then we have to adjust our strategy accordingly.
I mean, Keir Starmer is, I suppose, doing the classic, and I don't single him out solely, but it is the classic sort of trying to walk this line of, yeah, we can do business with it, they're absolutely fine, and I'll press the flesh if I need to, and then simultaneously saying, yeah, but they're a bit iffy.
And I think, look, the Prime Minister's own words yesterday, he spoke of sober realism. So if we're going to speak about realism, then we have to start with acknowledging, giving an honest assessment to the reality that we face now, which is dealing with Beijing without any clarity and without direction exposes us to significant security risks. Now, why do we say this? Well, just observing what we can see from their behaviour, wave after wave of espionage scandals, laid bare by the Chinese state's own behaviour and genocidal atrocities that it's committing against the Uyghurs Uyghur people in within China and Xinjiang. It is laid bare by a renewable sector which is dominated by China, but it's thriving hugely because it's underpinned by said forced labour. It is laid bare by the British steel fiasco and other core British industries which will continue to be undercut, can never compete with such forced labour and cheap labour imports, and therefore are destabilised. And it's laid bare when we have British parliamentarians who remain sanctioned by the Chinese state, totally unjustified.
Yeah, completely. You touched on some of it there. What are the biggest threats? Is that threat espionage? Is it about what is happening with our telephones? Is it about who's listening to us, who's collating data on us? How does that manifest, Joe?
So I think we have to look at the way in which the Chinese state operate and how they seek to control and infiltrate and exert their power abroad. And this is often done through their own sort of United Front Work Department. And we've spoken about this before. But the complexity that we have here is that we have a state who have increasingly been embroiled in these espionage scandals. Yes, that's acknowledged. But we also have to look on our end and say, OK, what are we doing to try and prevent facilitating that? Now, looming over all of this is a still pending decision on the new Chinese mega embassy, and I must raise it because if this is approved by the government, it will absolutely pose significant security threats. This was, an area of contention for a number of reasons, not just with this government, but the previous governments of all political affiliations, where there remain unresolved issues to do with not just access to heritage sites, Cistercian Abbey ruins, but unexplained redacted rooms that were in this planning application. What are those rooms for? We still don't know. Serious national security concerns around transnational repression. And we have a lot of dissidents and diaspora community members, some of whom have bounties on their head who on British soil remain unsafe. And there is insufficient space for democratic protest as well around that site. So when we talk about these security risks, what I would also say is, well, if these are known, then what are we doing on our end to try and protect ourselves and defend ourselves? Because the Chinese state are going to continue to operate the way that they are. In fact, it's going to worsen. And we have seen that from their behaviour. And so really we have to pivot that discussion to saying, well, what are we willing to do to stand up? And I use the Chinese mega embassy as an example because I think it shows us where we are with our China strategy, which remains incoherent.
Yeah. Do you think we underplay, or perhaps we just don't talk about it enough, or maybe many people aren't even really aware of it to this extent, but the tentacles that China has across the world in everything from commerce, construction, banking, technology are so vast. It's almost but when you start to look into it and delve into it, it's utterly jaw-dropping. It is everywhere. We often joke, you buy something from Amazon, it costs you 50p and it always says made in China on the back. We know that they've specialised in being able to make cheap goods, but that's a mere bagatelle compared to the enormity of where else their reach is, not just in this country, but across the globe.
I think what's important to emphasize here is the lack of understanding around how the Chinese state operates. And that lack of understanding, it predominantly exists within government and within Whitehall. I think that we haven't quite gripped how we talk about China and how we understand the way that the United Front Work Department works, for example, within the Chinese state. How on earth can two British men get embroiled in an espionage scandal? These all seem very far-fetched, but this is the reality of how and the way in which the Chinese state operate. And in addition to that, sort of raising awareness where we can, I think what's really crucial, and there is concern about the behaviour of the Chinese state across political parties, is talking about how we can discuss our concerns to do with China, but more notably, what does national security mean for British people, British working people? The Labour government were elected on the mandate that we are there for the working people. So what does that mean? What are the impacts of the Chinese state's behaviour on those working people and on British industries? And when we have sovereign industries like the steel industry, for example, when we have Chinese state involvement within that, that's where it gets very concerning because the lines are blurred. And without that understanding within government, it's really hard to grasp really that some of this does feel quite far-fetched, but it's actually the way in which the Chinese state operates.
Yeah, I mean, it is something out of a book or a Netflix drama, isn't it? I mean, it really is in that sort of department. Do you think that the government are aware of all of this, but there's also another game that they've got to play, as we said right at the beginning? You know, they are looking, they don't want a war with China. They have got to be wary of China. They know all of that, but they've also got to, show a certain ambition to retain or improve ties with China. That's just the way that the geopolitical world works.
There are absolutely, these concerns are absolutely known to many within government. So, those who are within the cabinet, those who are just in the parliamentary party, and again, across parties as well. And so that is well understood. It's well understood to the extent that we're willing to say, okay, it's a national security risk. Yeah. However, where we lack that understanding is that just because we are willing to say, okay, we understand it's a national security risk, however, business as usual, well, that's the issue here, because we have MPs who talk about the concerns posed by the Chinese state, but they aren't advocating for disengagement. We understand the way in which the world works. Yeah. What we are saying is that where there are areas where we must have clear red lines, national security is number one in this day and age. So why are we therefore allowing a mega embassy decision to continue and sort of drag out as long as possible? Why are we then having visit after visit to China and simply raising the issue? But we know that on their end, fundamentally, there's a lack of understanding as to how we see foreign policy with China and how the Chinese see it. So that gap needs to be closed. And I know that there are, people who are fellow travellers within the Labour Party and government who understand that. But as always, you have the Treasury orthodoxy, you have the Foreign Office orthodoxy, where it's, unless you can grasp that reality and you have that understanding, it's really difficult to say we're willing to do something different. And so, that's why the work of IPAC, which is a cross-party network of lawmakers, is so crucial, because we're able to, support them as much as possible in challenging this. And again, just to emphasise, this is something that our Conservative members as well at IPAC suffered, with their previous government too. It's that machinery of government which sometimes lacks that foresight to be able to do something that might seem a little bit unorthodox, but it's needed. And if we don't wake up now, 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line, where are we going to be? That's our primary concern.
Got it. Jaya, great to have you on with us. Thank you for your time. Very thorough explanation of what is happening with the curious case of the Chinese government. Jaya Patak, who's from the Interparliamentary Alliance on China. And I think, if you spoke to Keir Starmer and the Foreign Office, they're aware of all of this stuff. I just don't think they know what to do about it. America doesn't really know what to do about China. You'll always have Mr. Trump go, spoke to Xi, it was a beautiful conversation. And, he's a great guy, we get on very well. There's all of that. And, but China, what China is brilliantly doing, if you're the Chinese government, is managing to run a very tight communist regime with an overt capitalist outer shell, which is why they can feed back the riches that are made from their dominant. We spoke last week about cars, didn't we? The car industry, of how literally the Chinese could obliterate what is left of the car industry certainly across European countries, and particularly this one as well. But even further than that, if they're knocking out a tasty-looking car, I know people say, well, they're a bit wobbly and they're not, you look beneath the bonnet and they're not quite as well made as, you get they've got a Range Rover Sport sort of equivalence. And it kind of looks a bit similar. I bet if you sat in the driver's seat, it looks all shiny and gorgeous, and there's probably an iPad on the centre console that makes it look very modern. And to all intents and purposes, probably works just fine. Might be issues with parts and spares going forward. I don't know how that works, but and then they're going to say, well, instead of it being 30,000 quid, if it was a Range Rover Sport, and that would be the low end, it's going to cost you 14,000. You can see why people would run at that. But nothing's being done about that. There's no government that goes, yeah, do you know what, we're going to stop that in its tracks. And even in America, I know they've got some tariff issues knocking around. But, the Chinese automotive industry is giving the likes of Tesla an absolute run for its money. And I think on certain weeks they outsell Teslas. So unless someone's going to stand up and go, actually, sorry, this can't continue, Unless they're going to do that, it will continue. And those tentacles are far and wide. As I mentioned, banking, construction, technology, cars, planes, you name it. The Chinese are flipping everywhere. Mark's in Glasgow on this very point. Mark, what have you got for us? Good afternoon.
Good morning. Well, I'm not sure what's going on, but the Conservatives, certainly Cameron and some of his sidekicks, and now we have our Labour ministers, particularly Rayner and Starmer, who have, despite the MI5, MI6, and surprisingly, I think Mr. Khan or Sir Khan, saying we don't want this Chinese embassy. No. They are major enemies, but they're going to have one. Add that, though, to the two Chinese spies, who, but for the want of the government saying China is an enemy state, they would have gone to trial. But they didn't, and the government didn't allow it for some reason. And then you've got Chagos, where a Chinese judge in the International Court said Mauritius should get the Chagos Islands, though they had never have owned the Chagos Islands, and we're going to pay billions on top of this. You have to start adding these up and saying, what on earth? China clearly have got some serious dirt on through their spy networks on our politicians. I do believe so, and I suspect we've also got the civil service have been what's the word I'm looking for?
Compromised.
Infiltrated, I would say.
Okay.
Without, I mean, we've got the universities saying don't let Chinese people get onto some of your courses because they end up in our military and research establishments. This is all coordinated. It's not an accident these things are going on. And so why aren't our politicians just saying, no, you're not getting that mega embassy. No.
Yeah, well, you'd think so, wouldn't you? You'd think that would be a very easy call. I wonder what Donald Trump would do if they wanted to build the mega embassy in Washington. Would he curiously have a similar response, or would he just simply do what Trump tends to do? It's the most impressive part of his kind of brief, if you know, his being, is that if he thinks it's a load of old cack, he calls it out.
Well, I think he's absolutely right to do so. We have, at the moment in Labour, I'm afraid, we have a load of Fabian Society people who are global socialists, as is Blair. And I do believe that Blair is pulling the strings of Starmer. I don't think Starmer has any intellect whatsoever. He doesn't have the ability to think and act for the country. He's only going for self-interest. And I believe that Davos is his goal, and the only way he's going to do that is by sucking up to the globalist set and to hell with us, to hell with our taxes, because he's not going to be here. He's going to be living the jet lifestyle.
Yeah, he'll be on a hammock in Barbados, as I always seem to say. Correct. Mark, thank you very much indeed for that. Before we go any further, we'll go back to some more calls in a couple of moments. The voice of doom. Have we got an answer? Have we finally got an answer to this voice?
Rightly and properly.
It's day 14. No one's got it so far. These are some of the guesses. Peter Lilly. James Wellbeloved. Aisha actually put that on the screen. That's a make of pet food. I swear it is. That's not a real person. She says it is. What often happens with these, people guess with like a random name like Wellbeloved, or they put their mate's name on there and hope it gets read out. Anyway, James, apparently 3 different people said James Wellbeloved. So, okay, well, who is he then? We're gonna find out. I think it's a pet food. Jeffrey Archer, no. Reginald Maudley, no. Leon Britton, no. Sir Raymond Gower, no. We haven't got a right answer, which means it returns tomorrow. Alicia's saying that James Wellbeloved was a British politician. Alfred James Wellbeloved was a British politician between 1926 and he died in 2012. And he was a very clearly well-loved politician, apparently, whose dynasty went on to create pet food. I'm just guessing, it's got to be the same people, isn't it? It's got to be the same company. Not a right answer. It rolls over to tomorrow. Stand by for that. Day 15. We're back with more comment from you coming next. Big news coming this December. Our talkTV app is moving to the Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. From Monday, 1st of December, the talkTV app will no longer exist, so don't miss out. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It's Talk 0344 499 1000. Let's go back to it. Oh, by the way, I was in the middle of reading out some tweets, some comments on X in the last hour before everything went blank on the screen. Kaz said, reference the jury, team jury, that is correct. It's our right to be tried by a jury and not a tradition. It was bad enough to lose legal aid in 2012, I think, and now no jury. How to reform it, says Kaz? Get rid of David Lammy. Yeah, I think that's pretty spot on stuff. More comment on this from you. Chris says, brain dead Lammy who rails against the British Empire and anything British. Here is how good our system has been since enshrined in law in 1215. 78 countries, according to World Justice Project of Law, have clearly adopted this. Some of the larger ones, the United States, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, India, Pakistan, Nigeria, Kenya, Malaysia, Singapore. All of that is bang on and good enough for me. Frankly, the argument that comes through is, well, in France and other European countries, they don't have a jury system. They think it's preposterous. They've got another system that works. They've got a great system of magistrates that first investigate cases. Then they've got a trio of top-notch lawyers that sit in judgment for the final part of a case where the verdict can be decided. And that works for the French, and it has worked brilliantly for the French. That's not what's being proposed over here, however. Nothing like it. Stuart's in Glasgow. Stuart, what have you got for us? Hi.
Yeah, good afternoon, Ian.
Good afternoon.
I've worked in construction most of my life, and that involved in toilet refurbishments, which took me into NHS buildings, football clubs, you name it. I've been to most of these sort of areas.
Yep.
And I did, and just listening to what's been chatted over the last couple of days, it just stuck out just a feeling I had years ago in the Edinburgh Sheriff Court. And I stepped through the door into where all the lawyers are, and it was like stepping into another world. And what stuck out was the lack of urgency.
Really, yeah.
There was no speed, even holding a door open for somebody. I remember a point, actually, I just walked away because I couldn't wait for them to come up the corridor.
Are they in another? Are they locked into another sort of vortex of time or something?
Exactly, it's a time vortex. It's like just maybe in the room Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson sit.
Yeah,
but it's just there's no rush, there's no time. Another £800 an hour, and if you multiply that up and down the country, you couldn't even put a camera in there. Because it would just, people would just go in the streets.
Is it a bit like, you know, when you meet a senior consultant in a hospital, it's it's a bit like meeting a god, isn't it? You know, and they've got people around them that defer to them, and they have a very certain. It's almost like somebody opened a packet of them. You know, there's a certain way that senior consultants kind of conduct themselves, and they're very laid back, and they're very. I know there's a few exceptions, and I wonder whether senior legal brains are in a kind of similar gene pool in that respect.
I think they like the way the system works. There's a lot of cancellations, and they think it's adjourned, no problem. That's another £800 or whatever they earn every day. And if you put Amazon in there or the Army or whatever, they
Yeah.
could turn it around, and all this situation about obviously the trying to increase the amount of cases going forward.
Yeah, I mean, if you work in a fairly senior capacity as a lawyer, you do very, very well. And of course, you know, you get a few weeks off in between cases, so
Yes,
your holiday entitlement is probably quite generous. And you know, there's hundreds of thousands of pounds on an annual basis going into your bank account.
It's a good job if you can get it. I appreciate we have to study to get there, but once you get there and once you step into that vortex, then happy days.
You're in the vortex. I love it.
all.
Stuart, great call. Thank you very much indeed for that. 0344 499 1000. Chris is in Epsom, whose message I just read out, Chris. Good afternoon to you.
Hi. Oh, you read it out? I missed it.
I literally just did. You were probably on the blower at the time.
No, actually, I was upstairs caring for my mum, mate.
Okay. How's she doing?
It's unfortunate. It's a downward spiral with some good days. She's got Parkinson's, osteoporosis, osteoarthritis, stage 3 kidney disease, and just been diagnosed type 2 diabetic as well. So
it's tricky. I get it. You know, I understand it as well, sadly, but got it.
That's why you get me calling in quite a bit and messaging, because she can't be left on her own for more than about an hour and a half.
Sure.
And because unfortunately part of it is she forgets where she is. Then she gets fearful and distressed, and you need to calm her down.
Yeah, of course.
Well, anyway, but I sent you that in because I thought that was an important.
This was about the juries and how, you know, 78 countries have essentially copied it and are still working fine with it. Yeah,
it was funny. It came out of something in 2015.
Mm-hmm.
I was working for Team Aspar, the Spanish MotoGP team, and the lawyer, a pal of mine, David, who pulled me in. We were in Indonesia.
Yeah.
And the lawyers that had been employed by the team at that point had done everything in Indonesian, in you know, as you would imagine it would be. But the funny thing was that David went, hang on a minute, they accept it in English over here. They work off English case law. You know, this is the biggest Muslim country in the world, and they actually work on our legal system. And then he went on to explain about the countries that when we had the empire, and as it is the Commonwealth now, the countries that had based their legal structure entirely on our system. And what the differences were with the Napoleonic system in France. And it was quite mind-blowing, actually. The two of the biggest things that we took around the world during the days of empire were education on a level basis for everyone, and justice.
And what?
And justice.
Oh, justice. Okay.
The justice system.
Yeah.
Which, they're things that are not. They're things that are not taught. You know, they're taught in school now to hate everything that's British. And Lammy hates everything that's British. I mean, he stood there. He's wanted. He's gone against the British Empire because of the Caribbean, and that they need. You know, they need reparations. Do you know the whole of the Caribbean works on our legal system as well?
It's interesting, isn't it? And you're right, he has called for reparations. I don't know what his position is on that now that he's a senior cabinet minister. Maybe that's somewhat changed, Chris, but we will wait and see. Listen, great call as ever. Good luck to everything, and good luck to your mum as well, Chris. Thank you for that, Chris in Epsom. It has been exported around the world, the jury system. And again, I know there's some countries that don't have that system, and they will claim that works fine for them. But Lammy is not suggesting replacing our system with one that is better. And there's the problem. We could have a debate with him about that if he was, and going, right, the French have done this, let's do that. He's not doing that. This is something that is likely to be completely inferior and goes right against the grain of justice, of which we were once upon a time the centrepiece of the world, leaders in this area. 03, even before the Romans. 0344 499 1000.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
25 to 3. Little bit of breaking news that has just come in. I'm pretty sure we're likely to discuss this tomorrow. Vladimir Putin has said that if Europe wants to fight a war, then Russia is ready now. Speaking after an investment forum in Moscow, the Russian president says Europeans do not have a peaceful agenda and are on the side of war, and seeks demands from the war in Ukraine that are not acceptable to Russia. Well, I think the only request, Mr. Putin, is that you shouldn't have invaded a country that isn't yours and killed lots of people doing it. I don't think that's an unhealthy or an unreasonable request. He says Europeans are also hindering the US administration and Donald Trump in their efforts to reach a peace agreement through talks. Well, if that peace agreement involves giving away land that you nicked, then that will be the reason behind that as well. Let's move to this story. Police have admitted they used a fictitious football match report that led to the ban on fans of Maccabi Tel Aviv ahead of that game against Villa. A revelation exposing that the grounds for the ban may have been based on false intelligence. Have a listen to this. We haven't got the clip there, but we will get the clip in due course. By the way, that doesn't actually surprise me if you look at what has been happening over the last couple of weeks on all of this. Let's speak to Max Radford, Maccabi Tel Aviv fan. Max, good afternoon to you.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you for inviting me on again.
That's a pleasure. Your response, Max, if you will, because this is not just a sort of footnote to the story. This is pretty integral to the story, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, first of all, it's such a source of embarrassment for the West Midland Police. I think going back to when this first started, I mean, the accusations against Maccabi Tel Aviv fans, and that being the reason that they essentially banned Maccabi Tel Aviv fans for coming, was only really used by, and at first I think it was by Tom Joyce from the West Midland Police, only after the game had happened. Prior to that, it wasn't actually discussed that it was Maccabi Tel Aviv fans. The reality was that they were paying to the hate mob, to the jihadist hate mob that exists in Birmingham, who put a lot of pressure on them, and they buckled under that pressure and banned the fans from coming. the accusation against Maccabi Tel Aviv fans that they are a risk due to hooliganism or as Chief Constable Guilford, I think his name may be, that there's some militaristic ultra fans in Maccabi Tel Aviv that are a great risk to the people of Birmingham is completely fabricated. And it goes beyond just the fabrication of the phantom match against West Ham that never happened. I know I'm a Maccabi Tel Aviv fan, live here in London, and I assure you I would have gone to that match had it happened.
Yeah.
It doesn't exist. That game actually never happened.
You would. I mean, it's your mastermind subject. I think I'm right in saying, Max. Right? You would have absolutely known, not because you're a fan, but as you rightly say, you would have been there. So I mean, you wouldn't have missed that. Do you? I mean, I wonder with stories such as this. This is not to defend anyone who's been making mischief, and frankly, I think you'd have to be a loon if you couldn't work out that this has anti-Semitism written all over it. I mean, at every level almost. But it seems that the story built probably by successful and mischievous and venal campaigns from some locals in the community, fed into the police, politicians as well stepping in, and then it sort of got to a point where it built so big that, you know, the Maccabi Tel Aviv fans are coming over, and you might as well invite a foreign army over. It's that bad. And then everybody sort of panicked and said, well, we better not go ahead with this. Is it, by which stage, of course, they decided they weren't going to source any away tickets for that match. So do you think it's sort of the perception became the reality?
I don't even think it's perception. I mean, it's just premeditated. You know, the hate mob that we've had to deal with in the last 2 years, especially since October the 7th, is organised. Everything that was organised there was, as I said, premeditated. Dare I say, exactly the same as what happened in Amsterdam. So, Maccabi Tel Aviv don't have any history of hooliganism or violence on away trips anywhere in the world. In fact, far less than pretty much every English Premier League club in their history, and so many other clubs from so many other countries that are really at the top of the list of this. So, yeah, absolutely, there is obviously an anti-Semitic and anti-Israel core to this.
100%.
But it's just how the story had changed along the way, especially once Keir Starmer stepped in. He was obviously against the ban. Because, and again, as I said before, it was a real source of embarrassment for all parties. But what we get from the West Midland Police now is, those individuals might not be anti-Semitic themselves at the West Midland Police, but they are under pressure locally. And as I said before, they buckled. The problem is when you start to cover your own tracks, and first of all, there's anti-Semitism there in the fact that they apply a double standard to Jews and to Israelis. That's something that we've had to endure all along. But once it gets to this level of the story, when they're starting to cover their own tracks, police fabricating evidence, I mean, can you believe it? And then you have a statement that's made yesterday, including the fact that they look through social media, because social media really gives you the truth on everything, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, literally the last place you would look if you wanted to find the truth.
Especially today. I mean, and I see a lot of it in my own activities, and pretty much if you find 5% of truth in there, that would be amazing.
That's a good
but then to give this kind of official statement or be in front of a committee and then continue to essentially cover your own tracks, the reality is someone then needs to, fall on their sword, but heads need to roll, because this is totally unacceptable or it will be repeated.
I mean, none of this oddly surprises me, Max, because, something like this I sort of sensed when I was watching some of those local politicians in those first weeks when this story kind of broke, talking about how we don't want this. I didn't feel I was listening to politicians talking about an intelligence safety issue. I felt that I was listening to politicians talking about how, I mean, they might as well just say, look, we just hate Jews. It's as simple as that. We're a very sort of Muslim area. We don't want those kind of people around here. That's almost what some of these people were saying. You could see the smile on their faces, the confidence that they were saying it with. This is our community. And it was horrendous to see in a first world country that people were talking in this way. And it got a free pass as well. It not just got a free pass, it ended up being acted on.
Yeah, I mean, I was there on the day, right? So I did go to Birmingham on the day. And obviously there were no Maccabi Tel Aviv fans in the Maccabi Tel Aviv section, but certainly it was outside the ground, as an interested party and a football fan. And I saw what was going on in Birmingham. There were posters all over the city and all over the area of Aston, anti-Semitic in nature, anti-Israel in nature, accusing Israelis of being baby killers. And to be honest with you, even though there was a huge police presence, there wasn't any issue with any, Israelis or Maccabi fans, but there was certainly plenty of issues and arrests with the jihadist hate mob that was there. But, the police didn't even take down the posters and the signs and everything that was there for the day before. So, we really do have it's not a societal problem, it's a systemic problem here. We have a very serious weakness at the top level of government, and that just filters down into police, into the two-tier policing that we see. And basically everyone that's got, motivated by this hate has a free pass now, has a free pass by the police.
I think that's the problem.
The worst of it.
And it would have been, okay, fair play. In those initial weeks, Starmer came out and said, it shouldn't be banned. And that was kind of it, really. And, even if you're not a massive fan of Donald Trump, sometimes you want that kind of fire in the belly. I'd love Starmer to have stood up and said, I'm sorry, this is completely unacceptable. This is not going to happen under my watch. I want to make sure every single person involved in this protest, local authority, the football club themselves, the police, everybody, this is not how we do business in the UK. Something a bit more robust, something animated, Max, something that sort of sounded like you really meant it.
Well, we're never going to get that from the current government, let's be honest. We've not had that on any topic. But, this was something that was so public, and it is our national sport after all. There's eyes of the world on European football matches. And this is why this kind of story escalated. The level of embarrassment this has brought, which is why Keir Starmer did say something in his usual weak way, but it wasn't enough. And actually, what would have happened if there was no advice to not invite Maccabi Tel Aviv fans? Would have there been a little bit of noise and aggravation and protest? Yes, there would have been. Would have been escalated into some violence? Certainly not from the Maccabi Tel Aviv fans, unless they are absolutely forced to defend themselves, which is kind of what happened, obviously, in Amsterdam. But no Maccabi Tel Aviv fans were arrested, right? It was premeditated. This is exactly what was going on in Amsterdam. Was looking like it may happen in Birmingham. I would say the great thing was that Maccabi Tel Aviv stepped in themselves after Keir Starmer's request to overturn this and said, we're not going to take our allocation of tickets because they can't risk their own fans not being protected by our police. That's the issue, is that the police cannot do their job because they are cowering to the mob. And if this is the way it is in Birmingham, and this is the way it is in football, this is the way it is in London. I've seen it. I've seen all the protests. I'm regularly in town to see what's going on there. And, unfortunately, it's like a mob rule. And for the sake of the future of this country, we need leadership that's going to turn that around, take charge, punish hate, punish support of terrorism and glorification of October 7th and calls for genocide against Israel, which we see everywhere, and, become a country that we can be proud of again. And sadly, we just don't have it. And I will say, I say this to you, Ian.
Go on, Max.
It's reached such a level that I was in Israel when the rockets from Iran were coming. And when I finally managed to get back to the UK, the people in Israel said to me, do you feel safe going back to London? We just had rockets, and they're asking me if I'm safe to go back to London. This is the situation, and it's bad for our country.
Indeed. On a slightly lighter note to finish on, Max, when you're not supporting Maccabi Tel Aviv, who do you keep your eye on in the Premier League?
Oh, it's not a lighter note at the moment, I'm afraid. I'm a Spurs fan, die hard.
Oh, blimey, mate.
So it's not been a good week.
I mean, it's been a horrific week.
We've still got some European matches to come, but
don't worry
my dream
about that.
was...
They'll go by the wayside.
My dream was that Maccabi Tel Aviv actually get to play Tottenham. But that, we keep missing each other in the draw.
Yeah.
What
a compromise that would have been.
Yeah, I don't know who I would cheer for. I guess both goals or no goals.
Yeah, true enough.
Is what I would take. So.
Listen, Max, great to speak again. I'm sure we'll speak soon to Max Radford, who is a Maccabi Tel Aviv fan and also a Spurs fan too. What about that? 0344 499 1000. Back to your calls. Ben is in Essex. On juries, Ben, let's go back to where we began. What are your thoughts on this announcement from Lammy today?
I think it's a disgrace, Ian. I mean, our country, rule of law and democracy is our core British values.
Mm-hmm.
And this Lammy, I mean, what are they doing? They're just dismantling this nation. This is a really, if this goes through, this will be a real dig to our fundamental human rights and democracy. And just a step towards communism, I think.
I mean, what a weird world when you think about conversations in pubs, you know, that in a year or so's time, we'll be talking about how we used to have jury trials. I mean, that's so bizarre when you think... I know they're going to remain for the serious stuff, but a lot of other serious stuff can happen below things like murder and even armed robbery. You know, there's loads of other serious offences that would be caught up in this change of regulation.
Exactly, and people are not going to get a fair or anything because this is just the establishment saying we're going to make the rules and that's it. Yeah. And that is the whole point of having a jury. And this is the whole create a problem, create a solution scenario where it's made to sound like it's for the best and for the greater good, but it's not. I mean, this should never, ever, ever go through.
Yeah.
You know, this is our British values being torn up.
Well, it might well be that there's so much kind of admin and bureaucracy to get through before this could even happen that this government are thrown out before it even gets there, Ben.
I hope so. I hope so. I mean, this government are just so incompetent. And when it starts stepping on our human rights and British values, we won't have a country.
Which is weird, isn't it? Because they're quite obsessed with human rights in other areas.
Exactly.
But not quite our own, which is a bit bizarre. Listen, Ben, I've got to move because we're about to hit the clock. I thank you for that. Ben in Essex, I hear there's upset in Ben's voice there as well as disbelief. And I think we should all share that on a day like today. More from you on the way. 10 to 4 now. This is Talk. Big news coming this December. Our talkTV app is moving to the Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. From Monday, 1st of December, the talkTV app will no longer exist, so don't miss out. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk 10 to 4. Here's Mark in Lincolnshire on juries. Mark, what have you got for us?
Hi there, Ian, mate.
Hiya.
Hi, mate. Yeah, where it is for me, to be honest with you. I think, I don't like the idea of getting rid of them, period, anyway, because I think it's something from the Magna Carta, essentially.
Yep.
It's something that's been exported around the world. It's the only real defined way of ensuring fairness in the system, because as Lammy himself said previously, as you guys have played the clip today, without jury trials, it just becomes the establishment.
True.
As literal judge and jury. And the problem with that, of course, is that we've seen far too many examples of, ideologically captured justices that are more than happy to throw down really, really hard sentences to people for literal thought crimes, where at the same time they will, for example, give a Afghan rapist a year or a suspended sentence, this kind of stuff. We see this all the time. So this is why, it's a particularly huge issue, this. Speaking on a personal level, Ian, I'm somebody that I'm I'm fairly active on social media from a theological standpoint. I'm a quite devout Christian. I've mentioned this many times. I have a theological issue with Islam from a purely religious perspective. In this, my religion teaches me that Islam is essentially the work of Satan. That's what Christianity
Does
tells
Christianity
you.
teach that?
Yes, it does teach that, because if you actually read the Bible, there's plenty in there. At the end of the day, Ian, just as a quick throw out, you got Matthew 7:15, beware false prophets who will come in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravenous wolves. You'll know them by their fruit.
But don't all religions have the same kind of... Because I've always thought, when I see a rabbi, an imam, a vicar or a priest, sort of all, together at one of those kind of love-ins that they have every now and again, I've always thought, isn't that a bit odd? Because each one of you thinks the other two are fundamentally flawed.
Well, absolutely, because I've said this as well for quite a while. You can't... I've said this about the king, I've said this about anybody that proclaims themselves to be a Christian in particular. If you hear this thing quite a lot, don't you? And this is the kind of stuff I will talk about online. You'll hear it quite a lot where people will say, oh, well, it's the same God. It's this, it's the Abrahamic God and all this kind of stuff. No, that's absolute nonsense. Because when you start doing that, if you're supposedly, in my example, a Christian, and you believe that, you're denying Christ. Because Christ tells us he is the way, the truth, and the life. Nobody...
I do get that. I do get that. Listen, on that point, we are about to hit the news, Mark. Thank you for that, Mark in Lincolnshire. You are allowed to be against anything you want to be against. That's the whole point of living in a free world. Paula says, I've worked in a Crown Court for nearly 20 years. I've yet to meet one of these lefty judges. They're not almost all daft old Tories or nothing at all. Well, that's Paula's experience. This is Alex Phillips with her experience.
Yeah, I've never really been in court because I'm a good girl.
You've never been a judge?
Apart from once.
Didn't you used to be a judge?
I should be a judge.
High Court judge.
I would balance those
Judge
scales.
Phillips, along she came. Oh, they would quiver like a frozen whippet when Judge Phillips showed up.
I'd love it.
Yeah.
But no, it's astonishing. I read something by the brilliant Tom Slater on X, and you know sometimes you just go, yes, get in, that's it.
That's it.
The
Someone
one.
nails it.
That's the post.
Slater nailed it.
Yeah, Slater nailed it. And he basically said, imagine if this was a reform government.
Yep.
Who had put people in prison for things they put on social media and who had now got rid of the jury service.
Yeah.
People would be like, they're tyrants, they're mad, it's a regime. You know, there would just be a mass outpouring of fear and scaremongering.
Oh,
Isn't this-
100%.
But when it's the Labour Party, it's like, oh, nice, bit of digital ID, lovely. Oh, shall we kill some babies at full term? Yeah. And the old people, that's so sweet because it's doing the right thing.
Well, that's the problem, isn't it? That's why, you know, we all know some lefties that we will break bread with, Alex, and, you know, have the odd pint with, and there's some nice ones out there. However, it's this moral card that kills me.
They always say.
It's like, yeah, we have a difference of opinion, but the difference is mine is morally
What
correct.
I hate is they don't give an answer. Listen for this one, Ian, right? Every time they're doing the media rounds or whatever, or giving an explanation, they'll say, well, we've lifted the two-child benefits cap because it's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Well, we've thrown a load of cement down our oil wells because it's the right thing to do. It's like that. I'm sorry.
Somebody
it isn't
told
necessarily the right thing to do.
Yeah. But they are so convinced, but it's almost hardwired to the point that I think, you know, the anthropological journey where things about us change. You know, we used to have 3 hands and a tail or whatever, you know, things like that, and over the years. But if you become a lefty at 16 and you're still one at 25, actually your DNA and your neurological system literally hardwires itself to a new type. So they don't just say it, they actually believe it.
But
That's
actually,
the problem.
the interconnectivity between certain personality disorders, especially narcissism,
Yep.
and performative left-wingery, it's the sort of, it's not even a Venn diagram,
Yeah.
it's almost absolute. Because
Yeah.
all of these people who go out with their sort of, you know, anti-racism placards and all the rest of it, by and large don't care about the cause that they're demonstrating. They don't care if it might have ill effects